Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Garrett Smith, known as the nutrition detective around these here YouTube parts. And boy, do we have a barn burner of a show for you guys today. I've done other shows on blood sugar stability and metabolic syndrome and other stuff like that before, and I've done Twitter threads on it. However, somebody asked me to do an entire show, like as I do, on diabetes. And so that's what we're going to do today. And that's why I'm a little late as usual, because I've been assembling the data that I found over the past and new stuff since 5 a.m. this morning with all the normal getting ready for this and all that stuff. So we got a lot of stuff to go over today. If you don't know, nutritiondetective.com is my main website. You can find all of our websites down there. You can find products that I like and I use myself down there. I'm about to, like Kelsey's Niacin Black, which is a product that I use. I'm going to drink it on air here and maybe get the niacin flush that you'll get to see, which is not scary. And we're going to cover niacin as part of diabetes as well, niacin deficiency specifically. So anyway, that's what we got today. I normally would do testimonials, but because this is going to be a long show, it's going to be a long show. I think I have about 15 browsers with each one with multiple tabs. So we're going to be hitting a lot of stuff. Now, before we start, for those of you who are new to this work, what we are doing here is we are figuring out the cause of humanity's suffering, especially chronic diseases, via the toxicities that we all have, the deficiencies that we all may have or not, and how this all fits into toxic bile theory. If you do not know what toxic bile theory is, I'm not going to go over that today. I will connect it, as I always do. However, toxic bile theory is something that we have we have 2 live streams dedicated to it. Yeah, there's episodes 53 and episode 71. They're here on this channel under the live, tab. That's where all the live streams are. And you're going to want to go there. If you do not know what toxic bile theory is, you're going to want to go there. Maybe go there now and watch those and then come back to this, or just watch this one and then go watch it later. Because if you don't understand toxic bile theory, some of this is you're not going to get it. Okay. Especially at the start where we go over bile and the gut biome and how it connects. So anyway, let's get moving. Let's go into this one. Okay. So first, I know this is kind of a weird place for me to start, a page from the World Health Organization. However, as most of you know already, I'm not a fan of the WHO. However, sometimes they put out truthful information. Remember, disinformation is always mostly truth mixed with important lies. So think of that when we're looking at the WHO. So diabetes. The thing I want to go over with these 2 first links is so you understand, if you have diabetes or you have metabolic syndrome or you have blood sugar problems, one of the key things in this work, if you want to get better, is you have to take responsibility for the fact that you have this condition is showing you are toxic, you are deficient, and you have an excess of bile leaking into your blood, which I'll show you in the research. And this is what's causing your problems. Diabetes, you're not a victim of diabetes. It was created, whether by accident, whether by things you thought were good for you, or whether by things you didn't know you were doing that are not good for you. Okay? Diabetes is a disease of lifestyle and exposures. Okay? So if you don't want to accept that, you're going to have a real rough time getting better, because you have to take responsibility for it. All of this work that we do here involves taking personal responsibility of your health, no matter how you got here. It does not matter how you got here. The only thing you have to do now, or the only thing you can do now, is take responsibility and move forward. So what I'm about to show you, this first quote here: the number of people with diabetes has nearly quadrupled since 1980. Has the world population quadrupled since 1980? Probably not. Prevalence is increasing worldwide, particularly in low and middle income countries. Diabetes is mostly a disease of toxicity. We are being poisoned. I'm going to cover glyphosate in this too, which, funny thing, I want you to look at that statistic. Glyphosate came out in the late 70s. Glyphosate came out in the late 70s, and diabetes has quadrupled since 1980. What a weird coincidence. Then when you learn about how glyphosate slows a very important part of vitamin A detoxification and it sucks minerals out of you, it'll all start to make sense. But the thing you need to know is that diabetes is going up. And they'll say, as we go down here, okay, the prevalence of diabetes has been steadily increasing for the past 3 decades, mirroring an increase in the prevalence of obesity and overweight people. In particular, the prevalence of diabetes is growing most rapidly in low and middle income countries. Obesity is a toxicity condition. Overweight is mostly a toxicity condition. Now, people will say, well, it's from a lack of exercise. Sure, that plays into it. If you're not moving your body, you're not going to get to be healthy. You have to move your body. I'm not denying that. But also, as a lot of people get sicker, they start moving less. And it's like a chicken or the egg. Did they get sicker and then they started moving less, or were they moving less and they got sicker? It doesn't really matter. We're going to fix both of them. We're going to get them less sick, and hopefully you're going to get out there and move your body more, which, as we see in our program, as people get healthier, they want to move their body more. So it doesn't really matter if it's a chicken or the egg thing. We want to fix both. But, as Kelsey added here, ivermectin came out around the early 80s. So yes, they've been poisoning us with ivermectin too. If you're a fan of ivermectin, you may want to watch the video on this channel, the ivermectin double cross, which Kelsey joined me for. So yeah, ivermectin. And then, as Kelsey has told me multiple times, as you're going to see here, they can induce diabetes in animals with streptozotocin. It's a hard word to say. Streptozotocin. They can induce diabetes in mice with one injection of it. And streptozotocin is a relative of ivermectin. So we have ivermectin's connection coming out in the 80s, and we have glyphosate's connection coming out in the 80s. If you do not know, you are eating ivermectin in nearly all the things that you eat. It's everywhere. Nobody has an ivermectin deficiency. Ivermectin has been in you for a long time. So who's talking about Mike Fave? I don't care about that guy. He's the one watching my channel. I'm not watching his channel. I'll just keep getting people better. He can keep denying that it's happening. I'll just keep getting people better. That's fine. We had 3 testimonials we were going to go over today, but I just don't have time to go over today. So we got diabetes here. And then while we're here, one of the things we talk about with toxicity and vitamin A and copper and all these toxins that accumulate. Oh, wait, let me get that link for you guys. Today I'm going to have to do the links. Here's this link. No, I want to thank Mike for bringing more attention to the vitamin A toxicity idea, because as people watch his stuff, they're going to go, wait, I never heard of vitamin A toxicity before. And I eat a lot of vitamin A foods, and I've taken a lot of vitamin A supplements, and I've taken Retin-A, and I've done Accutane, and I've done all this stuff. Mike, I want to thank you for bringing more attention to this problem, because you're going to send people my way. It's called the Streisand effect. Thank you for doing that. So let's go into this. Toxicity accumulates over your life. If you are not getting rid of the toxicity as fast as you're putting it in, you are accumulating it. It's building up in your system. The idea that people have forgotten that vitamin A is fat soluble, or as I call it, fat storable, and it accumulates, like, people have forgotten this. Chronic toxicity is a problem of accumulation over time. So if I were here saying that diabetes is a problem of toxicity accumulation, would it make sense that as people got older, we would see more diabetes? Funny little fact, I've got this research on my Twitter. As people age, their serum copper, the amount of copper in their blood, which is toxic, goes up as they age. And also serum retinol, blood vitamin A, goes up as they age. Copper goes up as people age. Vitamin A goes up as people age. Do people feel better or worse as they get older? Oh, they feel worse, and they're getting more vitamin A and more copper in their system. What a weird coincidence. Let's just go over this one. Age and cohort rise in diabetes prevalence among older Australian women, case ascertainment using survey and healthcare administrative data. Let me put this in the chat. Let me skip to these real quick. Wait. Diabetes prevalence increased with age, was much higher in the 1946 to 51 cohort than in the 1921 to 26 cohort at similar ages, and was significantly associated with physical inactivity and obesity. Obesity is a toxicity storage condition. Okay, so moving on. Basically, as people get older, they accumulate more toxicity. This is why we see obesity go up. This is why we see inactivity go up. This is why you're getting stiffer and you have less energy. So let's get into it now. Let's go to the next one. So one of the things we cover a lot, toxic bile theory. Yes, don't forget to hit the likes button and talk in the chat and subscribe later. And the way to really help the channel is to watch more hours on the channel. I do know this channel, you're in danger of getting, a binge watching habit on this channel. And that's okay. You've got 157 episodes to watch, so it's better than your typical, streaming show. Here we go. Serum bile acid profiles in latent autoimmune diabetes in adults and type 2 diabetes patients. Okay, I want you to understand first autoimmunity. So people will say, well, do a show on type 1 diabetes. Autoimmune diabetes is toxicity. Autoimmunity of all sorts is toxicity. It's not your immune system going stupid. It's toxicity. So when they say here, this is the biggest cope I've ever seen, latent autoimmune diabetes. Oh, somehow you had diabetes in your system, but it was just activated later and we just don't know how. This is some of the greatest gaslighting and coping in medicine, right? It was just hidden under the surface and they did something to bring it out. What a joke. They don't want to take responsibility for poisoning us and making the food deficient, which we'll cover in here. Okay, patients with diabetes, latent autoimmune, there was latent autoimmune diabetes in adults and type 2 diabetes had significantly higher serum bile acids, especially conjugated bile acids compared with those in healthy controls. How do you get bile in your blood mostly, folks? Those of you who have been here a while understand this. You get blood in your bile because your liver is dumping bile. And if you watch the toxic bile episodes, you'll understand that you are leaking. If you are unwell, the more unwell you are, the more you are leaking bile into your blood. Okay? The more bile in your blood, bile by definition is the most toxic fluid in your body. It's your liver's poop, basically. Think of it that way. Your liver's trying to get, when people talk about the liver detoxing, they don't understand that the liver doesn't really detox anything until it has made the bile and the bile has left your body. Best way for the bile to leave your body is through pooping. Best way to help your body remove more bile with each poop would be soluble fiber and charcoal. Not everybody can do a bunch of these at the start, so these are all dosed based on your tolerances and where you're at. It's not just everybody does tons of charcoal and tons of soluble fiber. That doesn't work that way. Okay? So, patients with diabetes had significantly higher serum bile acids. They are leaking more bile into their system. This bile contains, as we're going to go over, toxic copper, excess iron. What else? Oh, we got vitamin A is leaking into your system via the bile. We've got all sorts of other things. Glyphosate. Like when you see glyphosate in the urine, how did it get there? It leaked into your system via the bile. So let me see if there was anything else on this one. I don't think there was. Nope. So we're just going to establish a pattern here. Understanding Bile acid signaling in diabetes, from pathophysiology to therapeutic targets. Oh, wait, so they're talking about treating diabetes by targeting the bile. What a weird concept. What are they going to try to do then? Probably just shut down your bile. That's what medicine does. We don't want to do that. The bile is the cause of your problems by leaking into your system. The bile is the solution to your problems because that's how you're going to get rid of the toxicity. It's a poison on the way in. It's a poison on the way out. We have to get rid of this stuff. So to get rid of it, you have to make it. To get rid of it, the best, you need to seal up the toxic holes that have been eaten by the bile. That is the cause of it leaking into your system. Okay? So, just wanted to connect something here. Dysregulation. This means it's not working right. Dysregulation of bile acid homeostasis and dysbiosis. This is gut biome problems. Causes diabetes and obesity. So what I want to explain here as I go over in the toxic bile theory thing, your liver makes bile. Bile is how your liver gets rid of toxicity. So the bile is as toxic as anything gets in your body. Okay. Whenever you see in studies, when they're talking about something toxic, they like to avoid talking about it as being toxic by using the word homeostasis or signaling. This is how they hide it from you. And then, so you make toxic bile. The toxic bile goes into your guts. Hopefully, that's where it's supposed to go. And then this toxic bile, your gut biome is made by what we feed it or don't feed it. So then if you're feeding the wrong things, you get bad bacteria growing more. If you're feeding the right things, you get good bacteria growing more, and they force each other out, or we starve one side or the other. Now, the other thing you need to know about your gut bacteria is your gut bacteria takes your toxic bile and it turns primary bile acids, the ones that your liver makes, into secondary bile acids, which are the most toxic types of bile acids. So you make the bile, it feeds your gut biome. If it feeds it wrong, you make more of the bad types of bacteria. Those make more secondary bile acids. You then reabsorb those bile acids and they go right back to your liver through what's called the enterohepatic circulation. Standard American diet, it said that 95% of the bile acids that go into your gut are reabsorbed and they go right back to your liver. So you've got this toxic loop. How do we break this loop? Well, one of the first things we do is you stop eating the poisons. The best way to reduce your toxicity is not to do a weekend herbal cleanse that makes you crap your brains out. It's by putting less poisons in your body, and most people out there don't know what the poisons are, or they're eating more poisons on purpose, like vitamin A and copper. Let's drink out of copper cups. This is lunacy. So, again, we're just connecting it here. Disruption of bile acid homeostasis, again, covering up, and dysbiosis, your gut biome, causes diabetes and obesity. I just wanted to hit on that one. They already know this. Now, okay. Association of serum bile acids profile and pathway dysregulation with the risk of developing diabetes among normoglycemic. This is normal blood sugar levels, normal blood glucose levels, Chinese adults. Findings from the 4C study. Okay. I'm going to hit review on this toxic bile theory concept 2. Okay. The biggest problems with bile come about either due to the amount of bile in your blood, right? It's like dose dependent. The more of something bad, the more problems you get, right? It's like turning up the volume on your radio. It's the same music, it's just louder. Well, in your body, the more bile it leaks into your blood, the more problems. Then there is the recipe of the bile, the composition of the bile acid pattern, whatever you want to call it. I just think of the recipe, what it's made of, what's in it. The recipe is how so think of it as the bile amount in your blood is how intense the disease shows up. The bile recipe is what diseases show up, right? Just like cooking, right? If you have a recipe to make something, and think of how many different ways we might eat flour and eggs. Not that I'm advocating eggs, but flour, eggs, and sugar and butter, right? You could, and I'm not advising eating any of these things. I'm just giving you an example. We all know this. You could take those 4 ingredients and turn them into tons of different things by manipulating the amounts of them. And then you could double the recipe, you could triple the recipe, you could quadruple the recipe. You can make more of it by simply having more of those. So again, the recipe is what you get, the diseases. The amount of bile in the blood is how intense the disease is. So here we have this. On the other hand, conjugated primary bile acids. Pay attention to these words. Glycocholic acid, glyco. Taurocholic acid. Glycoquinodeoxycholic acid. Tauroquinodeoxycholic acid. And sulfated glycoquinodeoxycholic acid. And secondary bile acids, tauroursodeoxycholic acid. Do you know what this is? This is TUDCA. This is what people are taking thinking it's good for their liver. We're positively related with incident diabetes. So the recipe of the bile here, at last count, I believe I found there was 56 different bile acids. Okay. Primary bile acids are the ones made by your liver. So this is where we get into changing the recipe of the bile. This is glycine, glyco. Glycine bound to cholic acid. Taurine bound to cholic acid. Glycine bound to quinodeoxycholic acid. Taurine bound to quinodeoxycholic acid. And sulfur bound to glycine bound to quinodeoxycholic acid. And then we have TUDCA here, a secondary bile acid. Secondary bile acids are known to be the most toxic of them all. We have people taking pills of a toxic secondary bile acid. And this recipe was related to more diabetes. That recipe was associated with more diabetes. Pay attention to this part. These findings reveal novel, as in unique, like novel changes. They didn't know about them now, and they're saying, wow, these patterns are here in bile acids, exist before incident diabetes, and support a potential role of bile acid metabolism in the pathogenesis, the creation of diabetes. They can see the changes in your blood bile acids before you get diabetes. Do you have to be measuring blood sugar, or could you just watch these bile acids? Or could you, which is what we do here, you could measure all this stuff and try to find out, do I have this problem? Oh my gosh. Or you could just do the Love Your Liver program and work with me or the other practitioners and fix the problem. That's what we fix. We're the only people out here talking about it. So we're the only people out here who are going to fix it. So, oh, did I? Yeah, I switched that one. Did I forget the link? 333. Yeah, I know I got it. Okay. Let's keep going. Serum total bile acids associated with risk of incident type 2 diabetes and longitudinal, this is over time, changes in glucose-related metabolic traits. Where was it? Okay. Baseline serum total bile acids. So they just measured total bile acids at a baseline. Were significantly associated with incident type 2 diabetes and longitudinal, long-term, over time, changes in glycemic. This is related to blood sugar traits. Seems pretty obvious. And I did want to say, I saw your comment, Baptized in Fire. He said, in totality, toxic bile theory is the single most brilliant theory in health and medicine. It will prove itself right in time, I'm certain. Yeah. And when they actually start looking at it, you know, there's going to be researchers. I've kind of already, you know, this may not become popular in my lifetime. I understand that in the history of the world, like a lot of people are not appreciated in their lifetime. However, I'm thinking that I've got enough information out there that people will be able to appreciate it, at least over time. They say medicine is what, 20 to 40 years behind the leaders. So, I'm going to do it anyway. And other people are going to steal it and try to make it their own at certain points. Okay, human insulin resistance is associated with increased plasma levels of 12-alpha hydroxylated bile acids. Insulin resistance is diabetes, folks, basically. Metabolic syndrome is insulin resistance. Metabolic syndrome is what they call pre-diabetes. So, did I put this one up? PMC, yes, got it, okay. Okay, this is a hilarious statement. In healthy subjects, insulin resistance. Wait, why do healthy subjects have insulin resistance? Didn't they just say in the other study that they could see the bile changes before the diabetes hit? In healthy subjects, insulin resistance was associated with the increased 12-alpha hydroxylated bile acids, cholic acid, deoxycholic acid, and their conjugated forms. Healthy insulin resistance. This is like this whole stupid idea of healthy obesity. This is nonsense. But they're saying they could see this and it associated with these bile acids. Now, this is a statement I've used a bunch before. In type 2 diabetes patients, bile acids were nearly twofold elevated and more hydrophobic. Amount, recipe, disease. Here we go. Higher 12-alpha hydroxy divided by, like the ratio of 12-alpha hydroxy to non-12-alpha hydroxy bile acid ratios were associated with lower insulin sensitivity and higher plasma triglycerides. The recipe. It's the recipe. The worse this recipe was, the more diabetic problems they tended to have. Now, if you haven't seen it before, let me go and find my triglyceride article. If you did not know, triglycerides are absolutely related to vitamin A toxicity and niacin or NAD deficiency. So let me do this and we'll share this tab. Okay, let me put this link in here. So down here, your high triglycerides are just vitamin A toxicity. You can go through here. They show it over and over in study after study. It's just, and then we know that niacin is necessary, not flush niacin. Wait, let me mix this up. Let me drink my niacin. While I'm about to talk about this, we'll get to more of it later. You need nicotinic acid, also known as flush niacin, to run your detox systems that get rid of vitamin A. So again, is it a chicken or the egg problem? Did the vitamin A toxicity come first and deplete the niacin? Or did the niacin deficiency come first and make your vitamin A toxicity worse? It could happen from both angles. You have to use your brain that it's not always one way. Anyway, cheers. Thanks, Kelsey, for the Nia soda. And her store is open again, by the way, if you didn't know. And also, for those of you who used to use or who were using my lactoferrin, the Nutrition Detective lactoferrin, the best quality stuff on the market, we have it again. It's in the store. So if you want to see that, that's there. I mean, look at this. Vitamin A-induced hypertriglyceridemia in cholesterol-fed rats. Yeah. It's all there when you want to look. Now, let's go to, so this was, the gut microbiome. Let's go here. Okay, gut microbiome. So I'm doing reviews on this. I'm not going to go through a bunch of individual papers. I'm going through reviews that are looking at multiple papers here. So remember, I told you your gut biome can make if you got toxic bile, the more toxic your bile is, the more it ruins your gut biome. It turns it from a good microbiome into a bad microbiome. This is why some people, they take the right probiotic, whatever that is for them, it's going to be different. This is why, first of all, you go and you read on Amazon, like probiotic product reviews, and you'll find people who say, this saved my life by fixing this condition. And then you'll see other people saying, this is the worst thing I've ever come across. This caused me to get IBS or colitis or whatever. The same probiotic. How can this happen? Well, because your gut microbiome can make your toxic bile problem better or worse. Do you understand? It's not like the probiotic is attacking you. It's just changing your bile, which is then reabsorbed via the enterohepatic circulation. It goes right back to your liver. This is how your gut. So this is how, like, fecal transplants. What are they doing? They're putting in a new bacteria from somebody else. And I've heard there's lots of fecal transplants are not all good. You need to go and read on the internet about how fecal transplants can go bad sometimes. People are not always getting better from it. But what are they changing? Your gut microbiome. What does that change? It changes your toxic bile. It changes the recipe of your toxic bile. So, did I put this one up? No, not yet. We paint a clear picture of how strongly microbes are linked and associated, both positively and negatively, isn't that what I just said, with the fundamental and essential parts of diabetes in humans. The microflora seems to have an endless capacity to impact and transform diabetes. I can feel the flush starting. We conclude that there is a clear and growing evidence of a close relationship between the microbiota and diabetes, and this is worthy of future investments and research efforts. So remember, we showed the secondary bile acids in diabetes. What makes secondary bile acids? The gut microbiome. You reabsorb those, they go right back to the liver, and you have this relationship. I mean, think about this. Your liver gets toxic. It starts making toxic bile. Toxic bile goes into your gut. It changes your gut microbiome. Your gut microbiome then makes the toxic bile worse. You then reabsorb that toxic bile. It goes back to the liver and then damages the liver, as the liver now has to process it and turn it into toxic bile again, and then go and feed that to your gut. This is why conditions continue for most people to get worse and worse. They're stuck in a vicious cycle. The first way to escape that is to put in less toxins, because then you're not feeding the toxin. You're not making the bile more toxic. And then over time, your body's able to make the bile less toxic, so it changes your gut microbiome for the worse less. And the bad guys start starving, and the good guys start coming through. Oh, I didn't move this one up to the top. Here we go. Let's get up to the top. Understanding the role of the gut microbiome in diabetes and therapeutics targeting leaky gut, a systematic review. Intestinal dysbiosis was consistently observed in the mechanism of gut microbial, this is gut bacteria, probiotics, change in diabetic individuals, contributing to reduced insulin sensitivity and poor glycemic control. This is blood sugar stability. Consistently observed. Now, the one thing, I don't know if I did anything else on this one. Let me see. Nope. Okay. I want you to understand where leaky gut comes from, because people will just say all sorts of, like, they'll say gluten causes leaky gut. And I'm like, gluten doesn't eat holes through anything. Like, you're going to go rub gluten on your skin and see it dissolve cells and eat away villi? No, it doesn't work that way. The connection between leaky gut and your gut microbiome is in your toxic bile. I've presented the research before that bile, the liver cells that make bile, are damaged by the bile itself. It eats holes in the cells of your liver. This is what's called intrahepatic cholestasis, where you leak bile directly from the liver into your bloodstream. Then we talk about retinoic acid, which we're going to get into in just a second here. Retinoic acid is what they call the so-called active form of vitamin A. That's what you supposedly need to live from vitamin A, is retinoic acid. It's not retinol. Retinoic acid, as all trans retinoic acid, is known in aesthetic medicine as a chemical peel. It dissolves the upper layers of your face cells. So if you were eating vitamin A and making toxic bile. These things eat holes in things. So if you were pumping that toxic bile into your gut, it will eat holes in your gut. We call that leaky gut. I've shown this before in how bile modulates. The term they used was bile modulates or controls leaky gut. And retinoic acid eats holes in things. So now you know the cause of leaky gut. And the funny thing about celiac disease, as I've shown before, is celiac folks, when they eat gluten, they dump more bile. So are you starting to put it together? The bile ate away the villi, and you see the whole problem progress. Celiac is a toxicity condition. We have multiple people in the program now who they themselves have said that their celiac, diagnosed by a doctor, is now gone. Who else talks about making celiac go away? Nobody, because nobody's doing what we're doing. And never forget the study where they could not induce the inflammation of celiac disease in cells, in gut cells, until they added retinoic acid to it. They had to add vitamin A to create celiac in gut cells in a lab. When they didn't add the vitamin A, they couldn't get the inflammation that they needed. So let's go here. Gut microbiome and type 2 diabetes. Where are we and where to go? Yeah, I can feel that flush in my face. It's definitely there. Okay. Genetic constituents, high fat and high energy dietary habits, and a sedentary lifestyle are three major factors that contribute to a high risk of type 2 diabetes. Let's cover this real quick. Genetics. Genetics loads the gun. Environment pulls the trigger. Say this like 10 times every time you try to blame genetics. Genetics loads the gun. Environment pulls the trigger. A gun doesn't do anything until the trigger is pulled, even if it's loaded. This is why people can change their genetic destiny by eating different than their parents, or people, you guys may be in the program and doing this work already. And you're like, everybody in my family had this health problem and I've fixed it now. Genetics loaded the gun. Environment includes everything you put into your body for better or worse, whether it's you breathing it in, absorbing it through your skin, taking pills, eating foods, all the choices, exercising or not. Like, that's your environment. The people you have around you, are they positive? Are they negative? Like, all this stuff. Their mental and emotional contributes to this a lot. And your mental state is determined by your chemistry. That's the thing. Like, if you can think your way out of things, but it keeps coming back, as soon as you stop thinking about it and thinking in a certain way, and the problem always comes back, that's chemistry affecting your brain. You fix the chemistry, all of a sudden it stops returning, and the work you're doing actually works. So, high fat and high energy dietary habits. Well, let's go over this. What are the three ways that they use in studies usually to cause cholestasis or toxic leaky bile problems via diet? There's three of them. High fat diets, high sugar diets, glucose, dextrose, folks, low protein diets. How do we create toxic leaky bile via diet? High fat or high sugar or low protein. What are they saying here? Genetic constituents, load the gun, high fat and high energy dietary habits. We know these cause toxic leaky bile, and a sedentary lifestyle are three major factors that contribute to a high risk of type 2 diabetes. Sedentary lifestyle, where you're not getting enough oxygen in your system. Your detox system is oxidative. You need oxygen to run your detox system. So what does exercise help you bring more of into your body? Oxygen. This is how, one of the ways that exercise helps you. I mean, you just need to move. Like, I don't care if it's walking to start with. If you're really, really sick and you can't walk yet, we have people who can't exercise, like really, really bad fibro or other stuff. They just don't have the energy, or going even for a decent walk will lay them out for 3 days. You don't exercise yet. You get better first, avoiding toxins and fixing deficiencies. And then you start when you feel able to and you tolerate it. Several studies have reported gut microbiome dysbiosis as a factor in rapid progression in insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes that accounts for about 90% of all diabetes cases worldwide. Several studies, gut microbiome dysbiosis in the rapid progression of insulin resistance. The gut microbiome dysbiosis that may reshape intestinal barrier functions. Remember what we're talking about? It's toxic bile doing all this. How do you rapidly change the gut microbiome? You feed it the wrong things. How do you rapidly reshape the intestinal barrier functions? You put toxic stuff on it that dissolves cells. And host metabolic and signaling pathways, which are directly or indirectly related to the insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. Thousands of the metabolites derived from microbes, secondary bile acids, interact with the epithelial. This is like epithelial is the coating of everything in your body. So think of skin, think of the inside of your like stomach and intestinal lining. Think it lines the outside of all your organs, like the lining of everything, the outer lining or the inner lining of anything in your body is epithelial cells, okay? Hepatic is liver, and cardiac cell receptors that modulate, control host physiology. So let's read that again now that you know what we're saying. Thousands of the metabolites derived from microbes, secondary bile acids especially, not only, but especially, interact with the epithelial, hepatic, and cardiac cell receptors that modulate or control your physiology. Xenobiotics, these are things foreign to the human body, especially like industrial chemicals and pesticides and all that, including dietary components. Oh, this could include toxic vitamins, antibiotics, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, like painkillers. Strongly affect the gut microbial composition and can promote dysbiosis. Of course they can. Any change in the gut microbiota can shift the host metabolism towards increased energy harvest during diabetes and obesity. However, the exact mechanisms behind the dynamics of gut microbes and their impact on host metabolism at the molecular level are yet to be deciphered. Didn't I just show you it's the bile? I've shown you multiple studies that the exact mechanisms. Yeah, it's there. It's already there. Okay, let's keep going. Gut microbiota and complications of type 2 diabetes. Let me get this link. Joe, have I gotten all the links? Differences in gut microbiota composition have been observed in preclinical animal models as well as patients with type 2 diabetes, and complications such as diabetic nephropathy, diabetes causing your kidneys to fall apart, diabetic retinopathy, diabetes causing your eyes to fall apart, diabetic neuropathy, diabetes causing your nerves to fall apart, cerebro in your brain vascular disease, so like strokes, coronary heart disease, heart attacks, things of that nature, and peripheral artery disease. This is like thromboses, like clots, compared to healthy controls. So wait, how would the gut microbiome cause kidney problems? Okay, when your liver can't detox the bile and send it in the right direction, or it's leaking into your system, what's the secondary detox system that comes up? Your kidneys. You send too much toxic bile and everything in it to your kidneys fall apart. Okay. Vitamin A ruins eyes. Vitamin A is not necessary for your eyes to function at all. You need zinc for your eyes to function. Vitamin A ruins your eyes. Diabetes and bile will ruin your eyes. Too much bile in your blood will ruin your eyes. Diabetic neuropathy. These things dissolve cells. It will eat away your nerves. And it's just basically, this is how you can have one cause of all of these issues. What causes the different presentations? The recipe of the bile. What causes the intensity of them? The amount of bile you're leaking. Okay? Oh, wait. Isn't that what I just said? Severity. How severe the gut microbiota dysbiosis is was associated with disease severity And restoration with probiotic administration in animal models and human patients has been associated with improvement of symptoms and disease progression. How bad your gut microbiome is was associated with how bad your disease is, recipe and amount, and changing your gut biome with probiotics has helped the symptoms and the disease progression. Are you following how all this works? Like modern medicine, conventional medicine, and even alternative medicine is just like, oh, you just take probiotics and they do stuff. And then like maybe you get better. And if we don't, then I don't know. Maybe it's not your gut microbiome. It is your gut microbiome, and it's affected by your toxic bile. Gut microbiota and type 2 diabetes mellitus, association mechanism and translational applications. Metabolites, secondary bile acids, and bacterial components of gut microbiota affect the initiation, starting of, and progression, how it gets worse, of type 2 diabetes mellitus by regulating inflammation, immunity, and metabolism. Short-chain fatty acids, secondary bile acids, imidazole propionate, branched-chain amino acids, and lipopolysaccharide, this is endotoxin for you recovering Peters, are the main molecules related to type 2 diabetes mellitus. Many studies have investigated the role of gut microbiota in type 2 diabetes mellitus, particularly those butyrate-producing bacteria. So, it's all bile. Whenever you see the word inflammation, now they're starting to say, oh, inflammation, this is where medicine is going. Inflammation causes diseases. And then, so the humorous thing I say to that is I say, well, why can't we just then take anti-inflammatories and fix all our diseases? Why doesn't that work? Weird that it doesn't work, and then it ruins your liver. Okay. Your immune system, I'm going to help you with this here if you don't understand this already. Your immune system is a cleanup crew. If you're still buying into viruses and the whole pathogens cause everything, pathogens of any type, if they even exist, need proper soil to grow. So if you do not have the proper soil for the pathogen, they cannot grow. They will not grow. Imagine if a supposed bacteria could kill something as big as us, or an elephant. An elephant gets a bacterial infection and it kills it. Do you actually believe that your own immune system couldn't kill a little pathogen? But what if your immune system was a cleanup crew and it kept your soil clean and proper so you couldn't grow things? So whatever you believe in terms of pathogen theory, it should make sense to you that pathogens cannot grow in soil that doesn't support them. So if you are supporting pathogens, your soil is bad. You're not bad. The soil is bad. We want to fix the soil. And then metabolic rate, actually we have multiple people, for those who are into the metabolism, the pro-metabolic community, we get multiple people off of thyroid medications. And we have many people reporting that we bring their body temperature up to normal finally. I'm one of the few people I go and let's say I donate blood and they take my body temperature, and I'm one of the few people I'm sure that they ever see who has normal body temperature. Body temperature is a symptom of everything else. If you want to fix your body temperature, it doesn't mean shove a bunch of ice cream in your cake hole you're trying to put like nitrous in your engine for your car to run faster, but your car underneath it still sucks. You don't put nitro in a poorly running car. You make the car run better before you ever do anything like that. And making the car run better, all of a sudden it works better, and then you don't have to do all this stuff. So, yeah, that's that. So let's go into vitamin A. Hold up. I want to finish my niacin before I start on this. My vitamin A thread on Twitter, vitamin A causing diabetes. Here we go. This is something you can go read this if you want. Like, I think I'll hit on something here because I didn't want to do it, but I'm gonna cover it Anyway, did this. I just wanted to go over pancreatitis. Let me show you guys. Let's do liver, pancreas, bile duct, and then we'll find an image. I want to show you guys this before I go into pancreatitis. Let's do this one. Okay. I want you to pay attention here. Your liver makes bile. Bile goes into the bile ducts. It can then go back up into your gallbladder as a storage thing, but I want you to pay attention to this. It comes down, and it's connected to the pancreas. Pancreas is kind of related to diabetes, isn't it? Just a bit, just a wee bit. So wait, even if your bile is going the right way, could it back up into your pancreas? What might that cause over time or acutely? Pancreatitis, acute pancreatitis. But what if it's a slow burn? Do you think it could impact the pancreas's ability to regulate blood sugar? One of the things, this was something that I thought about for a very long time, was as soon as I started getting into the liver, I started thinking about diabetes, and for some reason, this was like the earliest thing of toxic bile theory. I went, I don't think it's a pancreas problem. I think it's a liver problem, which then the liver turns into toxic bile. So you can say that. So think of it this way. I mean, the liver's pumping your liver. If your liver dies, you die. Like if you can't detox, you die very quickly. Liver failure is like, you're done. So your body will not let your liver, you have no idea how much crap your liver can take. But so it's making bile, but let's say your pancreas can't take it very well, and your pancreas collapses in function first. It doesn't mean your liver was doing its job. The pancreas just couldn't keep up. And you destroyed your pancreas with your bile. Now, we talked about there was the GERD show where, so you make this bile, people go, well, why would it go backwards? I don't know. It just does. Why does bile go backwards up into your stomach? That's GERD. How does it go backwards this far? I don't know. It does. Go watch my GERD show. Go watch the GERD live stream, the acid and the bile reflux GERD live stream. But it goes backwards. So while we're here, we'll come back to that. Okay, pancreatitis. We're going to connect pancreatitis real quick, right? Because pancreas is involved in diabetes. Diabetes is considered a late feature of pancreatitis, since up to 90% of cases of pancreatitis have abnormal glucose tolerance or frank diabetes. That means they have outright diabetes. Oh, sorry. Let me get this one on. Okay. We're going to connect pancreatitis in animals. Pancreatitis was diagnosed in cockatiels, which are birds, fed excessively high levels of vitamin A. Hypervitaminosis A, vitamin A toxicity, increased the activity of sucrase. This breaks down sucrose into glucose and fructose and eliminates the duodenum, that's your intestines, ability to regulate this enzyme in the small intestine, which may lead to diabetes and digestive difficulties. So we're linking vitamin A toxicity to vitamin A toxicity to pancreatitis. Okay, so that was in animals. Let's go to humans, because people always say, well, that's not in humans. Isotretinoin, Accutane, 13-cis-retinoic acid. You must understand this. You don't have to accept it. It's just true. When you eat vitamin A, you convert that vitamin A, retinol, beta-carotene, whatever. The end product is going to be retinoic acids. Your body makes 13-cis-retinoic acid from some of it from the vitamin A you eat. So if you are eating vitamin A, you are effectively taking Accutane. If you are here because you are an Accutane survivor or an Accutane victim, you know how bad this stuff is. Okay? There is no difference. Scientists cannot tell the difference between 13-cis-retinoic acid from Accutane and 13-cis-retinoic acid that you made in your blood. And I can show you, I've shown the research before that people walking around who are not taking Accutane have 13-cis-retinoic acid in their blood and in their urine. So if you are eating vitamin A in significant amounts, you are making Accutane isotretinoin in your body. Doesn't sound good, does it? So here, let's connecting Accutane and pancreatitis. 1983. In the 1 year since isotretinoin, Accutane, has been available in the US, birth defects, so this is what they connected to it, birth defects, liver function abnormalities, pancreatitis may all be associated with isotretinoin therapy. 1 year, this was 83. They've known about this forever. It's toxic bile going back up into your pancreas. So you could do it short-term high dose, which would be like acute pancreatitis, or you can do it long-term irritation, inflammation, which is diabetes. Now let's do this one. Can we then connect 13-cis-retinoic acid, aka Accutane, aka isotretinoin, with insulin resistance problems? Here's the quote: 13-cis-retinoic acid treatment causes insulin resistance and disturbances in lipid and glucose metabolism. Let's keep going. And if you want these links, you can just go to the page. You may have to get a Twitter account though. And then you'll have to start following me. Sorry about that. Here's another paper. All data suggests that 5 months of isotretinoin therapy in acne vulgaris, this is just normal acne, patients, causes insulin resistance. And the increase in insulin resistance is not dependent on age, body mass index, how chunky somebody is, body fat mass, I believe that's what that is, and lipid levels of these patients. We can show that the very thing that vitamin A turns into, one of them, 13-cis-retinoic acid, directly causes insulin resistance. So imagine a whole lifetime of eating too much vitamin A. What do you think is going to happen? Well, we're going to show it in the research. All righty, let's keep going. First, let's go over carotenoids. So plant vitamin A. People love to think that plant vitamin A, and the researchers love to think that it's not harmful at all. But remember, every time the media wants to badmouth supplements, they choose 3 things: beta-carotene, vitamin A, retinol esters like retinol palmitate, and vitamin E, tocopherols and tocotrienols. Those are the 3 supplements that the media uses to badmouth all supplements. They're all fat soluble. They're all alcohols. Well, I mean, not carotene's not an alcohol, but retinol is an alcohol. Tocopherol and tocotrienols are alcohols. They are all stored. Beta-carotene is as well. And they build up. Is there anything connecting carotenoids with disease? Well, here, first we're going to establish you don't need carotenoids. Pay attention to this line, and then you'll get to see the gaslighting. Hypothyroidism. Didn't I just tell you how we fix hypothyroidism? Okay. Hypothyroidism, diabetes mellitus, hepatic liver, and renal kidney diseases may be associated with carotenemia. That's high carotenoids in the blood. Look at these diseases. Do we have problems with these diseases today? Do we have people trying to eat a rainbow? Eat your leafy greens and eat your tomatoes and eat your, squashes and carrots. You got to eat your carrots, right? So this is the gaslighting. So they're saying we find high blood carotenoids in these situations, but then they add, but are not caused by ingestion of carotene. Okay. Your body can't make carotene, so it's coming from your diet. How in the world can they say this? Unless they're purposely trying to lie to you. Okay. Did I put this link? Yes, I did. 7.4. Yes. Okay. Well, let's just go find a case study connecting carotenoids and diabetes. Carotenemia in a patient with excessive beta-carotene food intake and dysregulated diabetes mellitus. Maybe she tried to eat all these carotenoid foods because she had diabetes and it blew up in her face. A case of carotenemia, this is high blood beta-carotene, in a patient with excessive beta-carotene food intake, diabetes mellitus, and physiological amenorrhea, infertility. Hey, have you seen my Bill Gates thread about Bill Gates trying to make foods with higher beta-carotene in them? And golden rice, which has beta-carotene in it, and he's trying to biofortify things like yams and sweet potatoes so they make even more vitamin A. And now they're putting vitamin A in sugar and oil and all this stuff. It's almost like these things are meant to cause infertility. Let me go find the Bill Gates thread. Yeah, let me go here. I can do this one. Let's see how good the Twitter search engine is. Yeah, there we go. I got it right here. Okay. My Bill Gates thread. Oh, and here was the funny thing. They were trying to do research on the new high vitamin A banana that Bill Gates gave $10 million towards the development of. And they were trying to recruit people for it. And they said, we're only taking women. They wouldn't take men in the study. Why would that be? Maybe it didn't look so good for the men. Anyway, this is my thread on Bill Gates and how much he loves vitamin A. Weird that Bill Gates has talked about he would like to see fewer people. That would fix a lot of our problems if we just had fewer people. And he supported the jab, and he supports lots of vitamin A for you. He also uses a lot of his money to support Planned Parenthood. These are all weird coincidences, like less people coincidences. Okay. Diabetes and infertility. Okay. The patient developed yellow discoloration in the palms and soles of her feet. Blood samples showed a significantly increased level of serum beta-carotene, but normal vitamin A values and liver enzymes. The patient reported an excessive intake of carrots, approximately 1 kilogram per day, 2.2 pounds. Sorry, here it is. This is why, folks, blood levels don't show it. I'm going to show you this later with like manganese too. So she had beta-carotene, but normal vitamin A values and liver enzymes. So if people go and you're trying to look for vitamin A toxicity, and you're like, well, my liver enzymes are fine and my vitamin A is in range, it's a toxin to begin with. So if you have vitamin A running around your system, you got problems with vitamin A. And we've been over how blood vitamin A does not correlate with your liver vitamin A. You could be vitamin A deficient supposedly on your blood test and still have tons in your liver. I've shown this. Almost everybody who comes to me to get better from vitamin A toxicity has a normal vitamin A level. Almost everybody. And then they improve. How would that work if it's normal vitamin A and we're decreasing it? We're depleting vitamin A out of their system. Now, another thing, if you have ever had yellow discoloration or orange discoloration of your skin, you are absolutely vitamin A toxic in your liver, even if that coloration went away. Okay? That means that you moved the carotenoids, you broke them down into vitamin A, and you sent it to your liver. It just moved around. It just changed form and it moved. Okay. Moving on. Some of these we're going to start going faster on. I know I always say that. Carotenoids. This is the famous 2013 paper. Do you need carotenoids? None of the carotenoids are considered essential nutrients. No carotenoid is directly involved in a vital metabolic pathway, nor has the relative absence of a carotenoid been linked exclusively to the induction of a specific deficiency or chronic disease. Hence the lack of FDA-approved health claims. You don't need any carotenoids to prevent anything, which means they're toxic. If they are not essential and they cause problems in excess, they are just toxins. Okay? And how could we need retinol, but yet when you eat all the retinol in the world is created from carotenoids, and we can convert carotenoids into retinol. We convert it into retinaldehyde, first of all. Aldehydes are toxic. One beta carotene breaks into two retinaldehydes. Nobody ever mentions retinaldehyde. It's like they're scared to say that word because you're like, vitamin A is an aldehyde? This is terrible. Like, aldehydes are poison. Oh, we'll go over that. Did I do this link? I think I did, right? Which one are we looking at? Advanced? Yeah. Okay. Hey, how about those eye problems? Vitamin A is good for your eyes. Carotenemia, high blood beta carotene associated with vitamin supplementation used for treatment of age-related macular degeneration. It is interesting to note our patient developed carotenemia while taking recommended dosages of beta carotene and consuming a normal diet. Although hypothyroidism has been shown to be a risk for carotenemia, it doesn't go this direction. High carotenoids and high vitamin A causes hypothyroidism. Again, they put the cart before the horse because they have to believe that carotenoids are good for you. They have to keep selling you this. Our patient was clinically and biochemically euthyroid while taking levothyroxine as prescribed. They were hypothyroid already, if not getting worse during this. Now pay attention to this one. None of the other medical conditions that may be associated with carotenemia, this is supposed to be a dash, I believe. Diabetes mellitus, panhypopituitarism, hypothalamic amenorrhea, infertility, anorexia nervosa, not eating, this is like undertypes, inborn errors of metabolism. You were handed down problems from your parents. Wait, genetic problems can be caused by high carotenoids in the blood? That's pretty crazy. Malaria connected to carotenemia or liver or kidney disease were present. So let's change this sentence a little bit. Medical conditions that may be associated with too many carotenoids in your diet include diabetes mellitus, panhypopituitarism, hypothalamic amenorrhea, anorexia nervosa, inborn errors of metabolism, genetic problems, malaria, or liver or kidney disease. Oh, but it's not connected. It's definitely not. Carotenoids couldn't have caused this. Yeah. All right. Here was a funny picture. I didn't want to pull up the whole paper, but this was another post I did. What does the serum of a 1929 carotene toxic diabetic look like? So look at this picture. There it is. The serum of patient discolored by carotenoid pigment in the blood, the furthest to the left, this one. B, normal. C, urine of patient with carotenemia showing color reaction of carotene test. Blood serum. So they took out all the red blood cells. This is normal. This is high carotenoid eater. The urine is darker too. So they're peeing out carotenoids. And this is a JAMA paper. So let's keep going. Vitamin A and diabetes. Did I already do this one? No. based on the published data. And you remember how, okay, first, before I read this, you remember how I said you could have high vitamin A in your liver and low in the blood? High serum retinol, high retinol esters in the liver, the storage forms, and low serum retinol, low blood vitamin A. What are we going to see here in type 1 diabetes? Based on the published data, it appears that the development of type 1 diabetes leads to a reduction of the blood vitamin A level in humans and animals and increases of hepatic liver vitamin A stores in experimental animals. Your serum retinol test does not mean you're not toxic in your liver. If you have health problems, you're most likely vitamin A toxic in your liver. They don't do biopsies on humans very much of their livers for studies. They'll say it's unethical because diabetes is not a liver problem. And so they don't want to do a biopsy of their liver. It also helps them hide the problem so they can't see it in humans and then say it is happening in humans. I thought I had another thing on this page. But anyway, so I want you to show you here. Type 1 diabetes, autoimmunity, toxicity. Where is the problem? It's in the liver. And the liver's making toxic bile, which then goes back to the pancreas and destroys the pancreas, and then you get diabetes of whatever type. Lower blood vitamin A level, more liver vitamin A. Okay. Guess I forgot to come back and scroll up on this one. Pay attention here. Kidney function and retinol status. Serum retinol in type 2 diabetes mellitus patients. How bad does vitamin A screw up your kidneys? The study showed that 17 out of 41 diabetic patients, 41.5%, and none of the controls excreted retinol, vitamin A, in their urine. Don't you think if your body really wanted this vitamin, it would work really hard to keep it? Retinol excretion in the urine in these patients was 1.5-fold more prevalent than hypercreatinemia. Urinary retinol significantly correlated with clinically diagnosed nephropathy. This is kidney disease. All but one of the patients with hypercreatinemia excreted vitamin A retinol in the urine. Serum retinol, blood vitamin A, and retinol-binding protein, which is what protects you from vitamin A in your blood, in patients with hypercreatinemia were higher than in controls. What's going on is the toxic bile is breaking down your kidneys. It's eating holes in your kidneys. The toxic bile has vitamin A in it. It's kidney damage. Watch what they say here about why aren't they testing urinary retinol to look for kidney disease? Because watch what they're about to say. Our results indicate that 1, urinary retinol is a specific sign of tubular damage in type 2 diabetic patients. And 2, urinary retinol enables a more clear-cut identification of proximal tubule dysfunction in type 2 diabetes patients than urinary retinol binding protein or albumin. This sounds like a really good test. Why aren't they using it? Do they not want to find vitamin A toxicity? Weird. You're leaking vitamin A out of your kidneys because your liver's not getting rid of the bile through your poop. It's going back into your blood, and then it's eating holes in your kidneys. Grant Genereux, if you haven't seen his website, ggenereux.blog. He has 3 free ebooks there that you could start with reading about his story of getting out of this. He fixed his chronic kidney disease. He was heading for dialysis. He was jaundiced, which means his liver was jacked up and he had too much bilirubin in his blood, and it was depositing in his skin. He had chronic kidney disease and he had terrible eczema. I bet he had a lot of vitamin A in his urine. And how did he fix all of those things? He stopped consuming vitamin A by doing what he calls the prison diet. He did beef or bison, black beans, white or brown rice. he fixed the kidney problems that are described here by not eating vitamin A. So anybody who's saying that like vitamin A is coming out of, people will make stuff up. You guys have seen this. They'll be like, oh, the vitamin A is coming out of the kidneys because the body's trying to use the vitamin A to heal the kidneys. People make up shit all the time. People in the health field are some of the most full of shit people out there. It was like somebody last week at my live stream trying to say that the copper was coming out of the tissues to help fix the problems. No, that is the biggest like cope I've ever seen by people who are just desperate for copper to be good for them. Oh, we're going to go over copper here. Don't worry. So we got that. Now, high retinol to retinol-binding protein ratio in non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. This is type 2 diabetes. Sam, you're talking about Mike Fave. Nobody here cares about him other than the fact that he's driving people to us by awakening more people to the vitamin A toxicity that they have, and then they'll just question and they'll see his stuff and they'll go, well, wait, what is vitamin A toxicity? I probably have it. So anyway, it's nice. I'm not going to address him. He can do whatever he wants. He can keep sending people our way. So retinol to retinol binding protein. Your body makes retinol binding protein to protect you from free retinol in the blood. Free retinol in the blood is extremely toxic. If you don't make enough retinol binding protein, you will have more problems with vitamin A toxicity. So, a high retinol, too much free vitamin A, to not enough binding protein will cause more problems. That's what I'm going to say. The mean or the average retinol to RBP ratios of diabetics were higher than those of the control subjects. More free vitamin A, less protective binding protein, more disease. The high retinol to retinol binding protein ratio implies that an excessive or free retinol, possibly, I'm assuming this means excessive amount of free retinol. This is just not worded correctly. An excessive or free retinol, that doesn't make any sense, possibly exists in non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Free retinol is toxic. Don't believe that when they try to tell you that RBP is like the chauffeur that delivers the vitamin A so tenderly and gently to the tissues that need it. It's not doing that. It's protecting you from it. And you need enough zinc and enough protein to make in your diet to make retinol binding protein. So if I say that so they say that diabetics don't have enough retinol binding protein to the amount of retinol. You need zinc to make retinol binding protein. Take a wild guess at what we're going to find later is deficient in diabetics. It's a certain mineral I just mentioned. Zinc. Okay, so we'll go over that. Okay. Serum retinol and carotenoids in association with biomarkers of insulin resistance among premenopausal women. HOMA-IR, this is insulin resistance. This is a test for insulin resistance. Okay? Serum retinol, blood vitamin A, was positively associated with higher insulin resistance. So higher serum retinol, more insulin resistance. Pretty straightforward. Results indicate a possible role for serum retinol, blood vitamin A, in the pathogenesis, the creation of type 2 diabetes. Okay. The effect of isotretinoin, remember we just talked about this. If you eat vitamin A, you are making Accutane or isotretinoin in your system. You are peeing it out in your urine. Wait, how would it come out in your urine? Do you think that isotretinoin, 13-cis-retinoic acid, going through your kidneys is a good thing? If it's eating holes in things, and all trans-retinoic acid. The effect of isotretinoin on insulin resistance and adipocytokine levels in acne vulgaris patients. We've already shown this with those other papers. I just like to hammer it home. All data suggests that 5 months of isotretinoin therapy in we already went over this one. Acne vulgaris patients causes insulin resistance, and the increase in insulin resistance is not dependent on age, BMI, body fat mass, and lipid levels of these patients. So Accutane just causes insulin resistance. Did I do this one? Here, we'll do it again. There's that link. Let me see if this one we already went over too. They're pretty straightforward on this one. This is PM. No, let me get this one. Okay, 13-cis-retinoic acid. This is Accutane, right? Therapy induces insulin resistance, regulates inflammatory parameters, and paradoxically increases serum adiponectin concentration. They were not expecting this. That's why they say that. Here's the statement. 13-cis-retinoic acid treatment causes insulin resistance and disturbances in lipid and glucose metabolism. We already went over how vitamin A causes high triglycerides. Vitamin A is in LDL. Your body is making LDL, the bad cholesterol, to protect you from vitamin A. It's another binding thing. I don't know if I had anything else on this one. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I got a bit on vitamin A. Oh, wait. No, didn't want that. Here we go. Vitamin A transport in the plasma of diabetic patients. In diabetic patients, the mean level, the average level of retinol ester was significantly elevated compared to that of normal subjects. Okay, let's hit this. Retinol ester is retinol bound to a free fatty acid ester. This is how you store vitamin A in your liver. You are not supposed to have retinol bound to free fatty acids floating around in your blood. In the research, if you have too much, more than 5% nowadays, it used to be 15%, then they lowered it to 10%, and then they lowered it to 5%. If you have more than 5% of retinol esters in your blood, compared to if the retinol plus the retinol ester, all of it together, that's 100%, what they're measuring in the blood. They're saying if more than 5% of that is retinol esters, not retinol palmitate, retinol esters, if more than 5% of that is retinol esters, that means you have diagnosable vitamin A toxicity. Okay? This is in the research. You're leaking fat-bound vitamin A out of your liver into your blood. Gosh, you think the liver cells are damaged when they're doing that? Maybe it's in your toxic bile. Maybe your liver's falling apart. Hey, in diabetic patients, they find more retinol esters in the blood compared to normal people. Now let's go through this one. Ultracentrifugation study showed that the average of 72.6% of retinol esters was recovered in the lipoproteins. What's that last L in HDL and LDL stand for? Oh, lipoproteins. It was recovered in the lipoproteins of density higher than 1.006, and the remainder was recovered in the chylomicrons. Gel filtration profiles for the separation of plasma vitamin A demonstrated that retinol esters presented in the HDL, LDL, and larger molecule size lipoproteins suspected to be VLDL as well as in the chylomicron. What if we've been told all the wrong things about cholesterol, and cholesterol is actually made by your liver to protect you from vitamin A? Why would we be finding this toxin in it? And why would more retinol esters be present in diabetics? Vitamin A homeostasis in the diabetic rat. In the normal rat, plasma retinol palmitate. This is plasma retinol. This is a retinol ester. Okay, the fat-bound vitamin A. In the normal rats, plasma retinol palmitate was very low. and the level was increased 10 times by diabetes. Detailed time course studies showed that rats became hyperglycemic, diabetic, within 48 hours of streptozotocin injection, a relative of ivermectin. One injection, 48 hours, they were diabetic. Yet the plasma retinol palmitate level was not elevated until some 3 weeks later. Remember how they said that the bile acid profile could predict diabetes? It's like a time delay. What are they saying here? There's like a time delay. Severe diabetes did not significantly influence plasma retinol. However, free retinol in the liver, the most damaging one, was elevated within 10 days of initiation of the disease and continued to increase for the duration of the study. Does diabetes tend to get better or worse with time? For most people, it just gets worse. It just degenerates. These results show that streptozotocin-induced diabetes significantly alters the concentrations of hepatic liver retinol and plasma retinol ester. So here's the thing. This is the part that most people don't understand. So they'll say, why is vitamin A toxicity such a big deal now? Well, because you were handed down vitamin A toxicity probably from your mother. You probably were exposed to more vitamin A than anybody who came, than other people who came before via, eat the rainbow or eat liver or eat tons of egg yolks or whatever. And then, as Kelsey mentioned, ivermectin came out in the 80s. That slows down vitamin A detox. Glyphosate came out in the late 70s. That slows down vitamin A detox. Medications that you took can slow down vitamin A detox. So you got to imagine if all these things are slowing down detox, it takes you much less intake to become more toxic. So then your detox is slowed down, so less will cause you to become more toxic. But then also everybody's encouraging vitamin A through every freaking source you could put it in your body. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, doesn't it? So it's not that you had to eat too much vitamin A to become toxic in it. It could be the other things you did. They gave these rats one injection. One injection. So imagine what your antibiotics you took as a kid did to you. The jabs you got through your life. The birth control. Oh my gosh. Ladies, stop taking birth control and protect your daughters from this poison. You could ruin their health forever. It may never recover. Like if they work with me, we can fix a lot of it. But if they don't work with me, they may never recover. So let's get into the next one. So now we're going to get in. So we've shown what too much free retinol is bad. Not enough RBP, not enough retinol binding protein to retinol. So you need the retinol binding protein to protect you from the retinol is bad. We've shown carotenoids are bad. Now, retinol binding protein 4, as they're going to talk about here, your liver, your body conserves energy. Okay. Your body will only make retinol binding protein if there's retinol around to bind it to. Do you understand this? So there are multiple papers who say that you can use retinol binding protein 4 as a surrogate, as a stand-in for measuring serum retinol. You don't make retinol binding protein unless there's retinol around. So if you ever see studies where they're trying to blame retinol binding protein as the problem, no, it was always the retinol that was the problem. And then if they start saying, well, there's, I didn't put this paper in here, but there's papers saying, well, it's retinol binding protein 4, but there's no retinol in it. They're trying to blame the retinol binding protein 4. Well, how about it lost its retinol and now it's free retinol, which is the damaging thing. Okay. It's amazing that people can't put this together. So yeah, is serum retinol binding protein 4 a predictor for diabetes in a genetically high risk population? Genetics loads the gun. Environment pulls the trigger. Wait, did I have... Here it is. I'm wondering if let me refresh this one. Let me see if I had anything in here. Why isn't it showing my highlight? Come on now. Oh, anyway, let me go back up and read the part here in the, okay. And then we'll find the other ones. Higher serum retinol binding protein 4 and its positive correlation. So that means they go up together. More retinol binding protein 4, more insulin, more glucose, more insulin resistance. In healthy, non-diabetic patients of genetically high-risk population, indicate its role as a predictor for the onset of diabetes in the coming future. That's not good. Let's go find these other things that I mentioned. Here we go. We observed that as serum retinol binding protein 4 increases, so more vitamin A, serum insulin also increases, predicting its crucial role in creating hyperinsulinemia-like environment which prevails in type 2 diabetes. Okay. At the same time, before any significant changes in diabetic markers, we observed elevated serum retinol binding protein 4 in genetically high-risk populations, indicating its role as a predictor for the onset of diabetes in the coming future. You can see the change in the vitamin A happen first. You can see the changes in the bile acids happen first. The disease comes later, but you can see these things. Do they ever test you for retinol binding protein 4? Do they ever test you for serum bile acids? Do they ever test you for vitamin A? No, they don't test you for any of these things. They don't want to find it. What would they do? Like, how would they help you? Retinol. Retinoic acid. Let me make sure, did I get this one? Let me just do it again, just in case. Retinol, retinoic acid, and retinol binding protein 4 are differentially associated with cardiovascular disease, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. An overview of human studies. Serum retinol binding protein 4 was mostly found to be positively associated with cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, mellitus, and obesity. Why aren't you ever told about these things? Like, if there's this much research. Elevated plasma retinol binding protein 4 is associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes in middle-aged and elderly Chinese adults. So just remember, your body does not make retinol binding protein unless there's retinol around. Why would it make it? Our study indicates that plasma retinol binding protein 4 is independently by itself associated with a 6-year risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Okay. Well, we kind of already went over this one. This is just a rehash. Again, serum retinol binding protein is more highly expressed in visceral. This is like abdominal fat. This is like the fat between your organs. This is the bad fat. This is the hard belly. This is like intimately related with like fatty liver too. Serum retinol binding protein is more highly expressed in visceral than in subcutaneous. This is like jiggly fat. This is the fat under your skin. Subcutaneous adipose tissue, and is a marker of intra-abdominal fat mass. The more vitamin A you have, the more fat you're going to have in your abdomen between your guts. That's what they're saying. Okay, let me find some other stuff here. So this is this thing we already said, levels of serum retinol binding protein 4 secreted by fat and liver cells. Secreted by fat and liver cells. Where do we store vitamin A? Fat and liver cells are increased in obesity and type 2 diabetes. Wow, if you had too much of a fat-soluble toxin in your body, where would you store it? Oh, in the fat. Fatty liver? Body fat? Okay. So, visceral fat, our retinol binding protein 4 mRNA was increased 60-fold and 12-fold in visceral and subcutaneous obese subjects, respectively, versus lean subjects, and 2-fold with impaired glucose tolerance / type 2 diabetic subjects versus normal glycemic subjects. So we got more vitamin A. Oh, let's keep going. In obese subjects, serum retinol-binding protein 4 was increased 2 to 3 times. Here's another one. And serum transthyretin, which stabilizes retinol-binding protein 4 in the circulation. Nah, it's a binding protein, was increased 35%. Okay. Transthyretin. THYR, that's thyroid hormone. It binds a thyroid hormone. It binds a T4. Retin, it's retinol binding protein bound to a retinol. Your body's making a binding protein that binds up a thyroid hormone with a vitamin A. By definition, if that T4 that's in transthyretin, if it's bound, is it free? Is it free to do its work? No, it's bound. It doesn't do anything. Now, would we tend to associate low thyroid states with obesity? Yeah. Does it make sense that your body would make more transthyretin, if you had too much vitamin A in your system to try to bind it up? And then indirectly, would that cause you to become hypothyroid because you have too much of your thyroid hormone bound? Do you understand? Your body's protecting you by making transthyretin to protect you from the retinol. Retinol plus a retinol binding protein with a thyroid hormone in there. Vitamin A induces hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism is associated with overweight and obesity. Do you see the connection? So, RBP4 levels are therefore linked to visceral adiposity, and visceral fat may be a major source of RBP4 in insulin-resistant states. Again, it doesn't make it unless there's retinol around. Continuing, we're going to be done with the other ones are going to move faster because there's less links, but I had to hammer this vitamin A one home. Okay. Oh, this is where it gets fun. Hey, if vitamin A toxicity, so we've kind of linked vitamin A toxicity, every single angle of it, to diabetes. What happens in animals when they reduce vitamin A toxicity? What happens? Well, let's go see. This is the kicker. This is like the nail in the coffin. Reduction in the dietary vitamin A status prevents type 2 diabetes and obesity in Zucker diabetic fatty rats. Genetically made to become diabetic and obese. Genetically designed to become diabetic and obese. Reduction in the dietary vitamin A status prevents type 2 diabetes and obesity in Zucker diabetic fatty rats. No, go keep arguing that vitamin A is a vitamin. Go ahead. I mean, really, you jokers out there, seriously. You got nothing compared to me. We conclude that the reduction in the dietary vitamin A status in both BF. What is BF? Let me find the BF. We got basal fat is BF. And what's the other one? High fat. VAD with high fat. Okay. We conclude that the reduction in the dietary vitamin A status in both basal fat and high fat conditions prevents type 2 diabetes and obesity in Zucker diabetic fatty rats. What was that I said earlier? Genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. They have genetically diabetic and fatty rats, and they change the environment. The trigger wasn't pulled. What if we have another study showing this same thing? Vitamin A status affects the development of diabetes and insulitis in BB rats. So let's go look up what's a BB rat. Oh boy, BB/WOR rats develop autoimmune diabetes mellitus with many features in common with human insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. So type 1. Well, yeah, insulin-dependent. I mean, you can get insulin-dependent over time. Diabetes tends to get worse, right? People start out, they're not on insulin, and then they get on insulin. But again, autoimmunity is toxicity. So if they don't put the toxin in, do they get the autoimmunity? In conclusion, retinol deficiency reduces diabetes and insulitis in DPBB-WOR rats. And retinoic acid can at least partly substitute for retinol in the development of insulitis. This is inflammation related to insulin. This is, retinoic acid and retinol, they turn into each other. So you have genetically prone, again, they develop autoimmune diabetes mellitus. They're genetically prone to this. Retinol deficiency reduces their diabetes and insulitis. Keep arguing for vitamin A, guys. No, vitamin A toxicity is not happening. No, not at all. Okay, so let's go to the next one. That was the biggest one. But here's a fun one. Copper now. People are like, copper, you need to balance copper and zinc, and you need copper. Okay. Copper in diabetes mellitus. A meta-analysis. Oh, wait, I didn't want that one again. I wanted to hit the wrong button. There we go. A meta-analysis and systematic review of plasma and serum studies. Overall, diabetic mellitus patients showed higher copper levels than the healthy controls. We never talk about how toxic copper is here, do we? Copper toxicity and vitamin A toxicity go together, hand in hand. Stratification based on the type of diabetes also indicated higher levels of copper in the plasma and serum of diabetes mellitus patients than in healthy controls, respectively. Stratification of diabetes mellitus patients associated with and without complications also revealed similar results. This meta-analysis suggests that diabetes mellitus patients carried higher levels of copper than healthy individuals. Joe, I did a copper and obesity show. May want to go find that one. So obesity and diabetes go together. There was a lot more copper in obesity. There's a lot more copper in diabetes. The people, you'll have the people out there, they'll be like, oh no, it's not bioavailable copper. No, copper's toxic. You've been duped into thinking copper is good for you. You've been duped. Just wait until we show what depleting copper does to diabetes. The role of the copper ion in the pathogenesis of type 2 diabetes. The aim of this study was to examine the involvement of copper ion in the pathogenesis, creation of type 2 diabetes, and evaluate the potential usefulness of a copper chelating agent for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. The usefulness of a copper chelating agent for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Gosh, do you think it's going to work? When they reduced vitamin A, did it work? Oh, okay. First, both serum copper ion and reactive oxygen species levels in genetically diabetic mice were significantly higher compared to those in non-diabetic mice. Okay, we got more copper in diabetic mice than non-diabetic. Second, we treated diabetic mice with a copper chelating agent, tetrathiomolybdate, molybdenum. I wouldn't ever use tetrathiomolybdate because this is sulfur. This is 4 sulfurs bound to a molybdenum. Sulfur slows your detox in general. We don't want it, but they gave them molybdenum, and molybdenum deficiency is epidemic. And they examined the effects on the development of type 2 diabetes. As the results, both serum copper ion and reactive oxygen species levels were significantly decreased by the treatment. So molybdenum lowered copper and reactive oxygen species, which are not good for you, which were equivalent to those in non-diabetic mice. So they got the copper ion down. What happened? Consequently, the treatment with a copper chelating agent reduced insulin resistance and ameliorated or made better glucose intolerance in genetically diabetic mice. In addition, serum triglyceride levels were also decreased by the treatment. In conclusion, our present results suggest that copper ion is involved in the development of type 2 diabetes and thereby a potential therapeutic target for diabetes. How about if they just fixed molybdenum deficiency and what we're going to go into, zinc deficiency, niacin deficiency? What if we just fix these other deficiencies and we stopped eating so much stupid copper and vitamin A? For all the zinc and copper balancers, first of all, you need to know. First, I'm just going to say zinc toxicity exists. You can take too much zinc. I've never denied this. When you read about copper deficiency studies, almost always it's a zinc toxicity study. They just gave them too much zinc. Zinc can cause problems if you take too much. Like, you could drink enough water to kill yourself. Okay, you can take too much zinc. You can take too much of any mineral. That's not an argument that you don't need it. Okay. It's also not an argument that you have to take copper with your zinc to keep them balanced because you've been duped by the supplement industry and all this other crap. Just don't take too much zinc. So here we go. Did I post this one? 314. Yeah. Okay. The role of zinc and copper in insulin resistance and diabetes mellitus. Okay. Well, one of these is good and one of them is bad. Zinc appears to activate key molecules that are involved in cell signaling, which maintain the homeostasis, the balance of glucose. Zinc also regulates insulin receptors, prolongs the action of insulin, and promotes healthy lipid profiles. Copper in excess can create oxidative stress, which is a factor in the onset and progression of type 2 diabetes mellitus. So which ones do we use in the program? We use zinc. Do we use copper? No. We antagonize the hell out of copper. We don't take stupid amounts of zinc. What's a stupid amount of zinc? Well, your first level is if you're above like 60 milligrams a day and you're not testing, you might cause yourself problems. I'm not saying that you might not benefit from that. I'm saying if you don't know, if you're not testing, you're guessing. And at some point, high doses of zinc become too much. If people aren't testing, I generally limit them to 30 milligrams a day. If you're not testing, I'm not going to tell you to take some stupid amount of zinc because I know zinc toxicity exists. Might you need more than that? Sure. Am I going to put myself at risk by telling you to take more than that? No, I'm not. If you test with me, we test blood and hair, and we listen to your response when you come into the office hours, which is the included follow-up in our packages. We look at your hair, we look at your blood, and we listen to how you're doing. And if any of those don't look right, we fix your dose of zinc. Okay? Some people have tons and tons of copper and vitamin A in their liver. And if you take zinc, it can kick out vitamin A, it can kick out copper into your toxic bile, which leaks into your blood, and you may not feel good. So there was somebody in the live chat last week trying to say that I was poisoning people with zinc. Folks out there, you all know this. If somebody was taking zinc and they didn't feel good taking zinc or taking that dose, what would be the very first thing that they would read in my articles or they would hear me say on this live stream? You're taking too much. Stop taking so much. Doc, it hurts when I do this. Then don't do that. If you're taking too much of something and you actually pay attention, and especially if you test, we will know. It's not that hard, especially if you're really sensitive. We have some people, they can't even take 2 milligrams of zinc. They don't feel good. Should they keep taking it? We don't do that. Practitioners who tell people, they tell them to take something. The people take something and they feel bad. Okay, here's what a good practitioner does. They say, okay, maybe you're not ready yet. Maybe it's not the right form. They say maybe something's wrong, and your body telling you don't feel good is a sign that you shouldn't take it or take that much. What do amateur practitioners do? They'll be like, oh, just keep taking it. You'll get better. And as many of you know, with the practitioners you've worked with, you gave up on that practitioner because you kept feeling bad, or they even told you to take more and you felt worse. So you lost faith in that practitioner because not only were they not helping you, but they were making you worse. It's not that hard. Like, my goodness. And you did the right thing by giving up that practitioner because they weren't listening to your body, and they were telling you not to listen to your body. Okay, so let's keep going in the nutrients section. Oh, did I forget to? Oh, I missed some toxicity stuff. I went way too far ahead. Oh no, I didn't. That was copper. Okay, that was copper. I thought that was zinc. Okay. So now we're going to go into. So Donna says she loves the office hours. Thank you, Donna. It's what makes us different. We include 6 months of support with people who buy a package with myself or our other practitioners. We don't want you to be alone out there. We want you to have help. We're not expecting you to be an expert in navigating your way out of this. However, you do want to read the program so you understand what we're doing. Don't try to buy a package and get the testing and then be like, I'm just going to take supplements and I'm never going to read the program or watching the videos. Don't do that. There is far too much for you to ever know from not looking at the program. Like that's why that's why the Love Your Liver program is included in our packages. Like, you get the whole program with the package. So now we're into this circulating. So we're at retinol-binding protein again, but we're going to go through iron. Oh, Joe, before we get into this, you may want to, Joe, if you could put up the ferritin live stream. I did a whole live stream on ferritin and iron and vitamin A. So if you want to watch that one after this, that one's available. Okay. Wow. So circulating retinol-binding protein 4, which is a surrogate for vitamin A level. The amount of vitamin A floating around might reflect insulin resistance associated iron overload. There's a crazy group of people out there. They do a protocol and they obsess on iron overload. They obsess on it. Like, they have people do so many blood donations that they drive themselves anemic because they just keep saying, do your blood donation, and people start getting to the point where they're like, I feel worse. And they say, oh, you're detoxing iron. Go do another blood donation. They make them do more of the thing that made them feel bad. And they don't ever measure ferritin. And they keep driving their blood iron down and down and down. And then the people feel worse and they don't know what to do. And they're just told to go donate blood. And if the people complain too much, they kick them out of their groups. This is terrible behavior. If something's not working, we change things. But the thing they don't understand is they obsess about iron overload. And yet they tell people to take more and more vitamin A. It is so plainly obvious in the research that vitamin A intake increases your iron absorption. It's all over the research. Vitamin A concentration might reflect insulin resistance, diabetes associated iron overload. Okay. Here we go. Did I do this one? Yeah. A positive correlation between circulating retinol-binding protein 4 and log serum ferritin was observed in both independent studies. So the more RBP4, the more vitamin A, the more storage iron in your liver. And the only reason ferritin's showing up in your blood is because it's leaking there in the toxic bile. That's why you got to go watch that other show. Serum RBP4 concentration was higher in men than women in parallel to increased ferritin levels. Wait, ferritin went up with the more RBP4 there was. This is what we see on testing. When I look at testing for people, the blood test, two of the blood tests I do, one is serum retinol and one is ferritin. They typically Typically does not mean always. They typically move up and down together. So if somebody was obsessing over ferritin, yet telling people to take vitamin A from cod liver oil or organ meats or brightly colored vegetables or any of that stuff, they are raising the ferritin. They're trying to bring it down because they think they have iron overload, but they're making it go back up. And they're also poisoning people at the same time. So, oh, and it is normal that men have higher serum retinol than women. Men make more bile than women. This is just the way it is. So it makes sense that retinol-binding protein 4 concentration was higher in men than women. On multiple regression analyses to predict serum retinol-binding protein 4, log serum ferritin contributed significantly to RBP4 variance after controlling for body mass index, age, and homeostasis model assessment value. Serum retinol-binding protein 4 concentrations decreased after iron depletion in type 2 diabetic patients. The iron donor lactoferrin, it doesn't mean it's always an iron donor, led to increased dose-dependent adipose tissue release of RBP4 and increased RBP4 expression, while apotransferrin and deferoxamine led to decreased RBP4 release. Okay, this is like an anti-iron agent. Okay, this is a drug. It decreased RBP4. RBP4 does, I want you to look at what we're doing here. Lactoferrin, we sell it. Love the stuff. Led to increased dose-dependent adipose tissue release of RBP4. They're making more retinol-binding protein 4. They're making more retinol-binding protein 4 by taking lactoferrin. And then when they gave the iron drug, the iron-binding drug, it decreased RBP4 release, which would make them more sensitive, more prone to vitamin A toxicity. I would bet if we went and we looked at the side effects of this drug, there would be all sorts of vitamin A toxicity looking like symptoms. The relationship between circulating retinol-binding protein 4 and iron stores, both cross-sectional and after iron depletion and in vitro, that's in cells, findings suggest that iron could play a role in the RBP4 insulin resistance relationship, which we already know there's a huge RBP4 and iron and vitamin A relationship. Okay. Association between ferritin and hepcidin levels and inflammatory status in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus and obesity. Okay. So this is, I'm just going over the abbreviations here. Obese is OB. Obese with type 2 diabetes is T2DOB, and controls are C. Obese, type 2 diabetes, and type 2 diabetes obese folks, individuals had higher ferritin, higher retinol-binding protein 4, and thiobarbituric acid reactive substance levels than controls. It's weird that these things just keep coming up all together. And again, I like to hammer this home so people aren't just like, well, you just found one study. Ferritin levels and risk of type 2 diabetes mellitus, an updated systematic review and meta-analysis of prospective evidence. Okay, so folks, most people who we see, have high ferritin. Most people have high copper. There are some people out there with low ferritin. If you are eating red meat like once a day and you have low ferritin, like chronically low ferritin, especially you ladies, you have a liver problem. That is why you have low ferritin. And what do we see with the people who stick with the program long enough and they do the work? We see the low ferritin eventually come up into the range that we want it. What do we fix? We fix the liver. There's rare cases where people need to take a little bit of iron, like an iron supplement. There's rare cases. And I'm not against that when it's necessary. Most of the time, it's not necessary. But none of that applies to any of you out there unless you're working with me and we're working on it. So again, I am a doctor, but if I'm not working with you, I'm not your doctor. Don't say you're doing what I said to do if you're not working with me and I said for you to do something. You take your own responsibility for your health doing any of this stuff. And it's just the way it is. Like, take responsibility for your life. That's what we should all do. This is what I did. This is how I fixed all my health stuff. So again, ferritin levels. Elevated levels of ferritin may help identify individuals at high risk of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Again, vitamin A toxicity goes up and down with ferritin. Ferritin leaks into your blood via toxic leaky bile. Serum ferritin has a risk factor for type 2 diabetes mellitus. It just goes with it, regulated by liver transferrin receptor 2. The mean average serum ferritin level of type 2 diabetes mellitus participants was significantly higher than that of the control group. They're leaking more bile. Bile is the source of the ferritin. Diabetic rats showed reduced liver TFR2 levels with increased serum ferritin levels. So these things just go together. Copper toxicity, iron overload, vitamin A toxicity. They go together. Now that's like 90 to 95% of people. There's people with low vitamin A, very rare when I get them, but they're sick as dogs and they get better with less vitamin A. And then we have people with low ferritin. That's a liver problem. And then we get people who are actually what I call low copper people. You want to know what's the funniest about the people who think copper is good for you? When we get these low copper people, like they're actually lower than I'd like for them, not lower than I'd like for them to be, but they're low. And when I see that lab come up as one of the first things I see on them, I immediately think that their liver is not doing very well. And I'll ask these people, have you ever tried taking a copper supplement for this or eating more copper? And most of the times they say, yeah. And I say, how'd you feel? And they say, I felt like garbage. If they had a deficiency in copper and they ate more high copper foods or they took a copper supplement, shouldn't they feel better? Unless there was a deeper problem of too much copper in their liver and it wasn't as high in the blood. This is where all the research that's been done on blood studies, some of it, it's not as useful as you think. If they can't look at the actual tissue, especially in your liver, they're not going to find it. So, one more on iron. Serum ferritin and metabolic syndrome, mechanisms and clinical applications. I did this one, right? We found a positive association between an increase in serum ferritin with the prevalence of metabolic syndrome and its clinical parameter. The serum ferritin level was positively correlated with the level of insulin resistance and inversely correlated with the insulin level of the patients. So, higher ferritin, more metabolic syndromes, the pre-diabetes, more ferritin, more insulin resistance, more ferritin, less insulin. Let's keep going. Oh, aldehydes, my favorite topic. Okay. So, aldehydes are toxic. Vitamin A turns into an aldehyde called retinol-binding. There's malondialdehyde and 4-hydroxynonenaldehyde. There's vanillaldehyde, that's vanillin. There's formaldehyde in some foods. There's acetaldehyde you get from drinking alcohol or eating too much sugar. There's all sorts of aldehydes in your body. All of your neurotransmitters detox into aldehydes. Histamine detoxes into an aldehyde. Oxalates go through the ALDH system. Aldehydes are absolutely critical to your health. One of the biggest things we do, again, that's different than everybody else, is we put a lot of focus on aldehydes, reducing your intake of them and making sure that your detox system called ALDH, aldehyde dehydrogenase, which turns aldehydes typically into acids, is running well. We do not try to gas up your ALDH by taking things that make it speed up. We give it the parts that it needs, the minerals, and the niacin, nicotinic acid, flush niacin, that is the gasoline to run it. And then things start running better. The biggest thing you can do to help your ALDH system is to stop eating aldehydes. The most obvious thing would be stop drinking alcohol. It is when you drink alcohol, the ethanol turns into acetaldehyde. It is the acetaldehyde that will kill you from alcohol poisoning and what gives you your hangovers because you didn't process it out fast enough. So, the association of aldehydes exposure with diabetes mellitus in the US population, NHANES 2013 to 2014. The mixed aldehydes might increase the risk of suffering from diabetes in males and accelerate the progression of diabetes in females, in which butyraldehyde and isopentanaldehyde play the most important roles. Okay. Aldehydes aren't good. The more aldehydes you take in, you gotta remember, how do aldehydes slow? The more toxic you are, the slower your detox system. You drive your car around, your engine gets dirty and gunk in it. It takes more, pushing on the accelerator to go the same speed, right? It's like when you get tired and you want to run faster, you got to push harder. It's the same thing with your car. The dirtier it gets, the harder your car has to work to put out the same output. So the more toxic you get, in general, the slower your detox system runs. It's just the way things work in nature. So it's really a vicious cycle, right? The more toxic you get, the more toxins you have in you, but your detox system runs even slower. So it can't even process that same amount of toxins anymore. And then if you have more toxins still coming in too fast, you accumulate them faster, which then slows your detox even more. This is a real problem. This is why generally people get worse. Now let's go over malandialdehyde real quick. Malandialdehyde is it's a fatty aldehyde made from PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. PUFAs are bad for you. Do not eat seed oils. Do not eat. If you ever look at first of all, the way to minimize PUFAs is to just not add a bunch of fats and oils to your food. PUFAs were not a thing until industrial oils came about. So we don't worry too much about fats in foods themselves. You don't want like super fatty beef as an example. Super fatty beef is just like, that's grain fed and all. You don't want that. You don't want that stuff either. It's okay to have fat in foods. Added fats are where the problems come about. So, malandialdehyde, the importance of lipid-derived malandialdehyde in diabetes mellitus. So where does malandialdehyde come from? It's a breakdown product. It's an oxidative product of PUFAs. So fish oils and your flaxseed oil and your seed oils and all that stuff. One of the things that it turns into is this. Nobody ever talks about it. They just say PUFAs oxidize. Well, they turn into an aldehyde. Malandialdehyde is a highly toxic byproduct formed in part by lipid oxidation-derived free radicals. Many studies have shown that its concentration is increased considerably in diabetes mellitus. I have shown a paper before that showed that malandialdehyde itself slowed down ALDH. So the very thing that needs to be detoxed slowed down the detox system. Do you see what I'm talking about? The more toxic you get, the slower your detox runs. So we have an aldehyde. Retinol-aldehyde. Remember, vitamin A is an aldehyde. Retinol-aldehyde. I believe we have papers on vitamin E turning into an aldehyde too. And there are some papers suggesting that vitamin D supplements especially turn into aldehydes in your system too. Cholecalciferol, calcitriol, they're alcohols too. So let's look at this. Aldehyde dehydrogenase. What detoxes aldehydes? In diabetic heart diseases. A major pathophysiological mechanism behind the development of diabetic heart diseases is oxidative stress mediated, controlled by toxic reactive aldehydes such as 4-hydroxynonenaldehyde. Notice how they cut it off for you. They don't want you to see the aldehyde part. Hydroxynonenaldehyde. That's why they call it retinal. They don't call it retinaldehyde. So aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 is a mitochondrial enzyme that has been found to detoxify these deleterious, bad for you aldehydes and thereby mitigate cardiac damage. Furthermore, its protective role in cellular signaling reverses aberrations or problems caused by high blood glucose, thereby protecting cardiac function. If your ALDH is not running well, you will accumulate toxic aldehydes. If you eat too many aldehydes or consume them or put them on your skin or whatever, you're requiring ALDH to detox them, and you will slow down ALDH along the way. 4-hydroxynonenal is another thing that is made from polyunsaturated fatty acids. Nobody ever talks about these. 4-hydroxynonenaldehyde or malondialdehyde. They talk about them in the research, but all your PUFA people never talk about them. I don't know why. Or they mention them in passing like one time, and they never come back to them. Okay, next one. Mitochondrial aldehyde dehydrogenase rescues against diabetic heart disease, cardiomyopathy through GSK3 beta mediated preservation of mitochondrial integrity and Parkin mediated mitophagy. Mitochondrial aldehyde dehydrogenase offers proven cardiovascular benefit. It's good for you to have a well-running ALDH system and less aldehyde, which means less aldehydes in your system. Diabetic patients also exhibited reduced plasma ALDH2 activity, cardiac remodeling, and diastolic dysfunction. Chicken or the egg? Did the diabetes cause the reduced ALDH2, or did the reduced ALDH2 cause the diabetes, or is it all, it doesn't really matter? What we want to do is we put less toxins in and we do the right things to support ALDH. Selenium, molybdenum, flush niacin. Further, so what happens when they sped up? They gave pharmaceutical things to speed up ALDH. I don't support this. Furthermore, the novel ALDH2 activator torazolid, so it speeds up ALDH, as well as the classical ALDH2 activator ALDA1. So both of these speed up ALDH. Protected against streptozotocin or high glucose induced in vivo in actual animals or in vitro cardiac anomalies, heart problems. Taking drugs that sped up ALDH2 protected against heart problems associated with diabetes. Remember, they could give diabetes to mice with one injection of streptozotocin. And they saw that as they sped up ALDH purposely, they could help that. You don't want to, speeding up ALDH is like putting a turbocharger on a crappy engine. That's all gunked up. Don't try to force your ALDH faster. You will pay a price. You will come back and tell me I was right. If you try to do things like, what is that DHM, that thing from like Asian pears, which supposedly speeds up your ALDH, it will mess you up eventually. Don't do it. Don't take that Z-biotic that has ALDH in it. It's a genetically modified probiotic that has ALDH, and you poop it out within like a day or two. You want to go take genetically modified probiotics and hope for the best? Go ahead. I mean, I'm not going to stop you, but I'm going to tell you it's a bad idea. You want to fix the underlying root causes, the toxicities and the deficiencies. Aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 activator augments the beneficial effects of empagliflozin in mice with diabetes associated, let me get this, HFpEF, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Heart failure, but they still have okay ejection fraction. Okay. Wait, we fed a high-fat diet to ALDH2. These are bad. I think these are bad ALDH2 mice. They don't have good ALDH2 genetically. Yeah, intrinsically low ALDH2 activity. There it is. So these mice have intrinsically genetically low ALDH2 activity to induce type 2 diabetes. They fed a high-fat diet, probably with lots of PUFAs, to mice that don't have good ALDH2 activity to induce type 2 diabetes. PUFAs and diabetes go together. It's not just one thing, folks. It's a bunch of things together. The Love Your Liver program addresses all of these that I've found. So they gave these meds, empagliflozin, empagliflozin. There we go. EMP. Well, that's a funny name for it. To reduce 4-hydroxynonenal, the aldehyde. And then they also gave ALDA1, the aldehyde dehydrogenase activator. This is supposed to be an ALDH2 activator to enhance ALDH2 activity. So they gave something to reduce PUFAs turning into aldehydes, and they gave an aldehyde dehydrogenase activator. So these two together improved exercise tolerance, diastolic and systolic function. It improved the aldehyde detoxification and cardiac liver kinase B1 AMP activated protein kinase pathways in ALDH2/2 mice with diabetes associated heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. Your ALDH function is critical to your health. Aldehydes are part of what's ruining your health. This all fits together. And then what seems to happen is that ALDH affects your bile production. So we are on aldehyde. There we go. Oh, now let's go into glyphosate and pesticides. Folks, one of the most important things you can do, regardless of what you read on any social media or any place on the internet, one of the most important things you can do is reduce your exposure to glyphosate and pesticides for your health. If you want to detox, the first thing you must start doing is stop intoxing. Organic foods have less toxins in them. Basically by definition. If you want to believe that regular foods are the same as organics, I mean, go ahead. You can poison yourself all you want. There's studies that show more pesticides in the blood of people who eat regular fruits and vegetables than people who eat organic. I mean, it's not like this is hard to find. And I understand that organic foods are expensive. Do your best. If you start doing a very simple diet of Love Your Liver grains and beans and muscle meats, especially like if you're doing ground beef or something like that from good sources, it's not an expensive diet. People talk about saving so much money on these diets now that you're not buying expensive berries and expensive vegetables and expensive fruit and all these other expensive crap foods that are making you sick. So this is a page from beyondpesticides.org. I'm just going to run through the titles here. One of their pesticide-induced diseases is diabetes. As they say here, pesticides and other environmental factors are almost always linked to type 2 diabetes. Association of glyphosate exposure with multiple adverse outcomes and potential mediators. Effective pesticides on peroxisome proliferation. I'm not going to read all these, but you guys can go to this page. Pesticides on obesity and diabetes. Pesticides and insulin resistance diseases. Organophosphate pesticides. Glyphosate is one of these. And respiratory disease, lung diseases, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Pesticides as endocrine disruptors, messing up your hormones, programming for obesity and diabetes. High levels of organochlorine pesticides in drinking water as a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. You need to clean your drinking water as well as you can, especially if you're out in areas with a well. Do not assume, as in make an ass out of you and me, do not assume that your well water is somehow clean and pure. If it's going into the ground near you, it's getting into your well water most likely. You need to do either reverse osmosis to your water or distill your water. You want your water to be as clean as possible. It is more important that your water is clean than it is that you do anything else to it. I don't care what kind of energetics you put in your water. No, you do not need to put trace minerals in your water. If it has 72 minerals in it or 84 minerals, or I just saw 102 minerals in it, you're putting radioactive things in your water and you're putting toxic metals in your water. Okay? We only focus on 6 minerals here. Berkey does not cut it. If any water filter you're using says it leaves the minerals in the water, if it says it leaves the minerals in the water, it leaves all the toxic minerals in the water too. Is a Berkey better than nothing? Yes. Is a Berkey taking out all the toxic metals? No, it's not. It's just not. They advertise that it leaves the minerals in the water. I mean, it's show me their advertising. That's what it says. So we got pesticide exposure with heart disease risk factors in youth. Oh my goodness, pesticide exposure with cardiovascular disease risk factors in youths with diabetes. Now they're seeing an association between organic foods and risk of type 2 diabetes. I bet that showed benefit. Here we go. Participants with the highest quintile of organic food consumption compared with those with the lowest quintile had 35% lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Seriously, 35% lower risk of type 2 diabetes by eating organic foods. That's the biggest difference there, right? Sure, they may have been choosing different foods, of course. There's a lot of stuff that goes along with that. Persistent organic pollutants with liver fat and insulin insensitivity or insulin resistance. Persistent organic pollutants, do you know that there's a ton of those in cod liver oil, along with all the vitamin A and rat poison vitamin D in it? Organochlorine pesticides associated with more diabetes. I'm sure this organic food consumption and metabolic syndrome, I'm guessing they're going to show that there's less metabolic syndrome. Yeah, Berkey, you don't have to throw it away. Just, it's not getting all the minerals out of the water. DDT, which is an organochlorine pesticide in diabetic nephropathy, kidney disease. Exposure to pesticides and human health effects. Yeah, more poisons in your fat because you store these things in your fat, and metabolic syndrome. I have to look up that. Oh, imidacloprid, a neonicotinoid insecticide. It promotes high-fat diet-induced adiposity. That's fatness. Persistent organic pollutants and risk of diabetes and obesity. Early pregnancy and risk of pregnancy-related gestational diabetes mellitus. Insecticide exposure and development of obesity and type 2 diabetes. Hey, guys, did you remember that ivermectin is an insecticide? Avamectin, ivermectin. Ivermectin will kill mosquitoes and ticks that feed on your blood if you took ivermectin recently. If you took ivermectin, your blood becomes an insecticide. Do you think that's good for you? Just remember, if the oncology industry, the cancer industry, was going to lose billions, if not trillions of dollars because of the ivermectin and the fenbendazole and all the crap they're pushing now, if the medical industry was going to lose trillions of dollars, if it goes that high, maybe it's just hundreds of billions of dollars. If they were going to lose all that money, the pharma cartel would shut down the production of these drugs. They're not going to let you buy generics and fix your problems. When is the pharma cartel ever fixed a disease? What disease can you get that you know you are guaranteed that if you take a pharma cartel medication, you're not going to have side effects and it's going to go away forever? Oh, Kelsey's saying niacinamide is technically a neonicotinoid pesticide. Nice. Yeah. Don't take niacinamide. Don't take nicotinamide. Don't take it. So epigenetic effects of endocrine disrupting chemicals. Whenever you're talking about genetics, the first thing you want to do is take out the toxins. This just keeps going. So I'm just going to move on. You guys can see this. Adult dietary exposure to a common pesticide leads to an obese-like phenotype and a diabetic profile in these mice. So even as they were adults and they got exposed to the common pesticide. How did my mom get her Parkinson's-like syndrome? When did it start? When my dad, before he passed away, he was a dentist and he was exposed to all sorts of toxic crap in his career. My mom worked in his office, but before my dad passed, he bought them a house on a golf course, like on the golf course. Pesticides and Parkinson's are extremely connected. And that's when her symptoms ramped up incredibly. I don't know if some of this can be undone. Like, think about this. You make toxins on a daily basis. It's like a car makes exhaust. Your car makes toxins in it that we kick out as exhaust. So like the very running of your car makes toxins. So what if you remember how I said toxicity slows down detox? And you store toxins in your system. So if you get so toxic that the toxins your body makes just to live, if you can't clear those, how in the world is it ever going to catch up with all the toxins you have stored? You see what I'm saying? So there may be a point of no return with this. There may be a point of no return where your detox system is so overloaded and so broke that we may not be able to get it back. I mean, we total cars, right? We don't say every car can be fixed. It's just the reality. It's sad. Like they're poisoning us to death. So anyway, I'm not going to go over any more of this. Since we're doing diabetes today, the association between urinary glyphosate, Roundup, and diabetes mellitus in the U.S. general adult population. Urinary glyphosate levels were 0.42 nanograms per mil in participants with diabetes and 0.34 nanograms per mil in participants without diabetes. This study provides new evidence that glyphosate exposure was associated with a higher risk of diabetes in the American general adult population. Buttercup said, someone told me distilled water doesn't have oxygen. Is that true? This is like made up bullshit on the internet. This is like people should just sometimes not talk. It doesn't have oxygen. I'm pretty sure water is H2O. O standing for oxygen. That's pretty wild. That's a pretty wild one. You should go and tell them that's impressive in how dumb it is. It's a good question, Buttercup. I'm not saying anything about you. But yeah, it doesn't have dissolved oxygen. Whatever. Well, you're supposed to breathe to get your oxygen. This is like when people are like, oh, you need to drink water to get minerals. I'm like, no, you drink water to get water. You breathe air to get oxygen. You don't need to drink water to get oxygen, and you don't need to put minerals in your water to get water. So, anyway, crazy stuff out there. This is like just the lunacy out there is amazing. Okay, so that was glyphosate and diabetes. The more glyphosate you have, the more diabetes you're going to have. Association of lifetime exposure to glyphosate and amino-methylphosphonic acid. This is a breakdown product of glyphosate with liver inflammation and metabolic syndrome at young adulthood. Findings from this study. Where was it? Let me find it. Okay, AMPA is a breakdown product of glyphosate. Thus, urinary AMPA likely results from direct exposure to AMPA from food residues in water. So it's breaking down in the food and the water with a lesser extent from the metabolism of glyphosate in the actual body in vivo. Our research suggests that lifetime exposure to glyphosate and AMPA may increase the risk of liver and metabolic disease in early adulthood, which could lead to more serious diseases later in life, such as liver cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Glyphosate, let's go over glyphosate real quick. It was created as an industrial boiler descaler. So when you have these giant boilers, you know, like, okay, those of you who have had a distiller, right? Especially the countertop ones, and you distill the water and you look at the bottom of it and it's disgusting with like white sludge. This is like the descaling. So if you know about limescale that happens on your, you know, when you have hard water and it happens on your faucets and that stuff. It's the same stuff. It's the hard water, like the water dries and it leaves the minerals behind. Not all of those are good minerals. So they made glyphosate to suck the minerals that were boiled onto the boilers, to break those minerals and suck them off. What do you think it's doing in your body to your minerals? It's sucking away your minerals. Then there are patents on glyphosate as a biocide. Bio is life, like, right? Antibiotic means against life. A biocide is a life killer. They have patents on it as a biocide. So glyphosate is pretty bad. And then as we're going to get into, it slows down your vitamin A detox, which is a weird thing because these papers I'm about to go into are from Stephanie Seneff, who was the one who opened my eyes to how vitamin A toxicity is induced or worsened by glyphosate. And yet now Miss Seneff is on the board of the Weston Price Foundation. And now she never talks about vitamin A toxicity at all. It's a really weird, like, 180. So anyway, let's go to the papers. So this is one of Stephanie's papers. Glyphosate, Pathways to Modern Diseases 3, Manganese, Neurological Diseases and Associated Pathologies. I want to, there's another part in here I want to go over about things being high in the liver and low in the blood. We further reason that under conditions of adequate manganese in the diet, glyphosate, through its disruption of bile acid homeostasis, ironically promotes toxic accumulation of manganese in the brainstem, leading to conditions such as Parkinson's disease and prion disease. Disruption, so again, it's bile. If you don't know about manganese and Parkinson's, you should go look it up. Manganese and Parkinson's are like this. So let's go find the next one. Yeah, we're going to hit on a bunch of, she did a bunch of these charts. The increased incidence of diabetes in the US is strongly correlated with glyphosate usage on corn and soy, as shown in figure 3. So what? Yellow's the diabetics. Okay. Now let me make it a little smaller so we can see it. Oh, wait. There we go. A little smaller so we can see it. Yellow bar is diabetes. The red is the genetically engineered soy and corn crops. Green is the persons with diabetes following the pre-1990 trend. So this is the 1990 trend right here, right? You see this line? It should be like this, assuming we weren't being poisoned. And then there's the amount of glyphosate applied to corn and soy. So look, it's weird. They like sandwich it. Let's keep going. Because of glyphosate's disruption of the cytochrome P450 enzymes, we talk about these quite a bit here. The liver becomes impaired in its ability to dispose of manganese via the bile acids. And instead, it transports the manganese via the vagus nerve to the brainstem nuclei, where excess manganese leads to Parkinson's disease. Recently, Parkinson's disease has also increased dramatically in step with glyphosate usage on corn and soy. So you can't get rid of manganese. Do you know what they can also give to study animals to give them cholestasis or toxic leaky bile? They can overload them with manganese. So again, Parkinson's disease. So the green line is the pre-1990 trend, and then we see glyphosate usage, and we see genetically engineered corn and soy, and the amount of glyphosate applied. Oh, I wanted to bring this one up. Vitamin K deficiency. So everybody's like, everybody's talking about vitamin K. I've shown before the research where vitamin A can be used to induce a vitamin K deficiency. Let's be clear on that. Vitamin A can be used in animals. They use it in animals to induce a vitamin K deficiency. Okay, and that was before glyphosate. So let's read this. Chlorismate, the intermediate in the shikimate pathway whose synthesis is blocked by glyphosate, is a precursor not only for the 3 aromatic amino acids, but also for tetrahydrofolate and phyloquinone, vitamin K1 in plants. So if glyphosate is blocking this, it's going to block folate production and vitamin K in plants. So if it's not in the plants, when you eat those plants, or when the animals you eat those plants, it's not going to have what it's supposed to have in it, like folate and K1. It's going to have less of it. Similarly, menaquinone, vitamin K2, is synthesized by bacteria from chlorismate. Thus, disruption of the shikimate pathway, which is what glyphosate does, contributes to vitamin K deficiency, which can lead to cholestasis. So let's just be clear here. Glyphosate inhibits the cytochrome P450 system, which is part of what detoxes vitamin A. Vitamin A can be used to induce a vitamin K deficiency in people and animals. Glyphosate will reduce the vitamin K production and folate production in plants. Vitamin K deficiency can lead to cholestasis, aka toxic leaky bile. This is never going to be put into one study for you. If you want it all like wrapped up with a bow, I can't even do that. I have to do these hour-long presentations to tie it all together. Okay. Decreased bile flow associated with the birth defect biliary atresia. So if somebody has poor bile flow, not just this birth defect, but generally poor bile flow, leads to manganese accumulation in the liver and in the globus pallidus. As discussed previously, bile acid synthesis, making bile and pushing out bile export, are disrupted by glyphosate and by surfactants, which are added to Roundup, which is also a common effect of many toxic chemicals whose detoxification would be impaired by glyphosate's disruption of cytochrome enzymes. Do you see why it's so important to eat organic? So glyphosate disrupts the cytochrome enzymes, which then are supposed to detox lots of other toxic chemicals you're exposed to. So your detox slows down, so you can't get rid of those other toxic chemicals. So then you start building those up. And then that slows your bile production. And then you start accumulating manganese in your liver. And manganese can cause cholestasis in your liver. I don't know why this was highlighted. This shouldn't be highlighted. Why did it get rid of? Oh, geez. That's no big deal. Wait, let's just do this. Decreased bile flow. There we go. There we go. We'll just do that. So let's go to the, let's see if the next, what they had was next. And finally, are they trying to reduce the people? Multiple papers on rodent studies have indicated disruption of the male reproductive system by glyphosate. And if you haven't seen my Twitter thread, why don't we just do this right now? Let's go to Twitter. Let me show you my Twitter thread on. Oh, come on now. Twitter search engine is the worst. It is absolutely the worst. I think the search engines, yeah, manganese is a neurotoxin. Absolutely. For those of you who haven't seen it, people will be like, they connected ivermectin with mad cow disease and prion disease. Did you know they pour ivermectin directly on the spines of cattle? This is a product they sell. Ivermectin pour on. They pour the medication on your cows. Let me see if this has my, nope. Let me find my ivermectin thread. There it is. So, if you haven't seen my ivermectin and damaging sperm production thread in men, guys, ivermectin is meant to get you if you didn't take the pokey. They have plans for both sides. Those who didn't get the pokey probably put ivermectin down. What if both of them are infertility agents? And what if ivermectin slows down vitamin A detox, which then causes its own infertility? It's all connected. And as Kelsey, so we had glyphosate in the 70s and ivermectin in the 80s. And we wonder why there's an infertility epidemic. And then we have the jabs. And then we have vitamin A toxicity. Okay? So let's go to the next one. But yeah, glyphosate ruins male reproductive system. Ivermectin damages the male reproductive system. So this is another paper by Stephanie Seneff. I really appreciated this work she did. I just wish she didn't abandon the whole vitamin A thing, because she did, which is sad. Oh, wait, I'm hitting the wrong. There we go. We want this to be bigger. So let's go down here. So again, this is celiac and glyphosate. You remember how I told you? So glyphosate inhibits vitamin A detox. They could not create celiac without vitamin A. Oh, they use more glyphosate. We see more celiac. You following? These are all connected. And if you want to find these papers, all the links are there. In section 4 of this paper, we describe the role of excess retinoic acid in celiac disease and show how this ties also to reproductive problems. We link this to the known effects of glyphosate on retinoic acid mediated or controlled by its suppression, slowing down of your cytochrome P450 detox enzymes. In this section, we first established that excess retinoic acid is a risk factor for celiac disease. But I thought it was gluten, bro. No, it's the bile, the toxic bile that has too much retinoic acid in it, eating away at your gut lining. And celiacs dump more bile, more toxic bile into their intestines when they eat gluten. Why does that not happen to everybody? I don't know. But, it's just like, why can some people run faster than others? There's a whole bunch of reasons why. Some of it's genetics, some of it's training, some of it's environment. Okay. We then show that excess retinoic acid leads to complications in pregnancy and teratogenic effects in offspring. This is birth defects. Glyphosate has been shown to exhibit teratogenic effects, birth defects, in line with known consequences of excess retinoic acid exposure to the embryo. And we propose that the mechanism for this effect may be glyphosate's known disruption of cytochrome P450 enzymes, which are involved in retinoic acid catabolism or breakdown or detox. This then links glyphosate to increased risk of celiac disease via its direct effects on retinoic acid. The same birth defects, glyphosate causes the same birth defects as vitamin A. Glyphosate slows vitamin A detox. Voilé. Okay? And then we know that vitamin A, well, we know here that vitamin A causes thyroid problems. Further support for an association between glyphosate and thyroid disease comes from plots over time of the usage of glyphosate in the US on corn and soy, time aligned with plots of the incidence rate of thyroid cancer in the US, as shown in figure 3. Yellow bars are thyroid cancer. Red is glyphosate amount applied. Blue is the percent of genetically engineered corn and soy crops. I mean, it would be one thing if they only had one chart and people are like, oh, you can plot, like, what were they doing? Frozen yogurt with violent crime. Somebody sent me that on social media the other day. Like, these charts look exactly the same. If they didn't do this with like multiple diseases and the disease charts look almost exactly the same as the lines, like this is why we do it from multiple angles, folks. So it becomes really hard to deny. Okay, let me go find the next one. Here we go. Since we have shown in section 8 how glyphosate can produce toxic effects on the kidneys via toxic bile through its disruption of gut bacteria by making more secondary bile acids and then leaking them into the blood, it is fruitful to consider whether glyphosate could be playing a role in the fate of Central American workers in the sugarcane fields. So the amount of glyphosate applied to corn and soy is the red line. The number of hospitalizations for acute kidney injury plotted against glyphosate applied to corn and soy. So this is the sugarcane field workers, I'm guessing. Number of hospitalized. Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. You need to eat organic as much as possible. Here was where Grant was headed. Early end-stage renal disease deaths. Chronic kidney failure ending in death. Again, same charts. They look exactly the same. It would be one thing if it was one chart, but when they have multiple charts that look like this, I mean, to deny this would just be insane. Oh, let's do this one. Molybdenum deficiency. One thing that glyphosate can lead to is molybdenum deficiency. If you have a molybdenum deficiency, you can't detox copper very well. If you have a molybdenum deficiency, you can't run ALDH well, and you can't detox vitamin A well. If you have a molybdenum deficiency, your sulfite oxidase, which helps you break down sulfur, which slows down detox at ALDH, it inhibits sulfite oxidase, and it inhibits xanthine oxidase, which is another detox enzyme. So you need molybdenum to run all sorts of your detox. Glyphosate depletes this. What does she say happens with a molybdenum deficiency, or what does this cause? Impaired sulfite supply to your DNA. That's not a problem. Damage/cancer teratogenesis birth defects. Megaloblastic anemia. This is typically associated with a B12 deficiency or a folate deficiency or both. But a molybdenum deficiency can cause it as well. And I've shown research showing that vitamin A depletes folate and B12. So vitamin A depletes folate and B12. I've got multiple papers on that. You need molybdenum to detox vitamin A. And glyphosate blocks vitamin A detox. Do you see all these connections? And the cytochrome P450 enzyme inhibition. So it suppresses retinoic acid catabolism. Birth defects. It suppresses bile acid synthesis. Gallbladder disease, pancreatitis. It inhibits the breakdown of xenobiotics, toxic foreign chemicals. Increased toxin sensitivity. Impaired indole breakdowns. Multiple chemical sensitivity, anybody? Liver disease, macrocytic anemia, big cell anemia. Kidney failure. What happens when you impair the shikimate pathway suppression? Okay, you're suppressing the shikimate pathway. Kelsey's going to like this one. What does glyphosate cause? A tryptophan deficiency. Impaired serotonin supply, hypersensitive receptors. The consequences, depression, nausea, diarrhea. Do you know what quote unquote vitamin we make from tryptophan in our body? Kelsey knows. Niacin, nicotinic acid. So if glyphosate suppresses tryptophan either production or if it somehow depletes it, you then would have even less of the building blocks or the breakdown, the substrate to make niacin out of. If you don't have niacin, you cannot make NAD. If you don't make enough NAD, there's like 400 different pathways in your body that need NAD to run, including your detox pathway, ALDH. This is really bad. This is like a poison that was designed to do very bad things. If anybody tries to defend like glyphosate in the comments, I'm just going to knock you right out of here. And then we'll go and just show Parkinson's disease. Hey, Parkinson's, it looks so similar to the other ones. And Parkinson's disease is connected to manganese accumulation in the brain and the liver. You can go look it up. So there's that. Now, next. That was manganese. Hopefully these next ones will go faster. Okay, magnesium. Everybody, even if you're early on in your health journey, hopefully you've heard about magnesium. Oh, one thing you may want to watch soon after this would be my magnesium, not manganese, my magnesium live stream about how to do topical magnesium and the approaches. I consider topical magnesium about 10 times as effective as pills to raise your magnesium levels. Oral magnesium you take by mouth, is better for helping you to poop than it is absorbing it. Magnesium you put on your skin, like our magnesium lotion, is better at helping you raise your systemic magnesium levels, which helps everything, as I've been over in all sorts of other live streams before this. So, magnesium intake and the risk of type 2 diabetes. Emerging epidemiological evidence suggests that higher magnesium intake may reduce diabetes incidence, and they wanted to look into that. This meta-analysis provides further evidence supporting that magnesium intake is significantly inversely associated with risk of type 2 diabetes in a dose-response manner. The more magnesium you have, the less your risk of type 2 diabetes. That's what the inverse means. Surfing USA said, chromium good or bad? Chromium is a toxic metal. Do not take it. I think I've been over that before, but I can cover that again. Do not take chromium to try to fix your blood sugar. Nope. Don't do it. Magnesium and type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is frequently associated with both extracellular and intracellular magnesium deficits. A chronic latent, as in hasn't shown up yet, magnesium deficit, or an overt clinical hypomagnesemia, low magnesium in the blood, is common in patients with type 2 diabetes, especially in those with poorly controlled glycemic profiles. I've shown research here before that vitamin A depletes magnesium. A low magnesium intake and an increased magnesium urinary loss appear the most important mechanisms that may favor magnesium depletion in patients with type 2 diabetes. Low dietary magnesium intake has been related to the development of type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Benefits of magnesium supplementation on metabolic profiles in diabetic patients have been found in most, but not all, clinical studies. Some of the things we avoid. So what vitamin A does is vitamin A yanks calcium out of your bones into your blood. When you get too much calcium in your blood, your body will shove it into your soft tissues to get it out of the blood, and or it will also pull magnesium out of your bones and other places to counter the calcium. So you're getting too much calcium in your blood from things like vitamin A toxicity. Copper toxicity will raise the calcium in your blood by pulling it out of your bones. And vitamin D supplements, vitamin D3 supplements, will also pull calcium out of your bones. It doesn't build your bones. Vitamin D supplements do not build your bones. I've shown a study, there was like a 4-year study in men where they had lower, but the guys they gave the vitamin D supplements to, it was like 4,000 IUs. They had lower bone density after, it was like 3 or 4 years. Vitamin D is ruining your bones. What you need to do is you need to get your magnesium, you need to get your zinc, you need to get sunlight or ultraviolet light and get enough protein. Oh, Joe was asking me which show do we focus on vitamin D? I don't remember. Oh, the rickets one, Joe. The rickets one. That's the one. Yes. So, magnesium, very, very important. Did I do this one? Did I put this in there? Article. Yeah. Okay. So again, if you're not doing your magnesium, I don't know. You need to. It's not in the foods anymore. I'll cover that. Magnesium and type 2 diabetes mellitus, clinical and molecular mechanisms. In addition to the above factors, magnesium deficiency has been linked to an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes in the general population. Listen to this, folks. For those of you who only want to eat foods, I'm not going to take any supplements. So if you know you're already deficient and the food is deficient and you have, let's say, an excess of calcium in your soft tissues and other problems, and you refuse to supplement, how do you ever think you're going to catch up? But let's just go through this. Magnesium content in the diet, the primary source for the body, and the content of magnesium in fruits and vegetables have progressively decreased. So Western-style diets currently contain between 30 and 50% of the minimum 30 to 50% of the minimum recommended amount of magnesium. Since magnesium deficiency has been associated with higher fasting glucose concentrations, glycosylated hemoglobin, this is hemoglobin A1C, or higher insulin resistance rates in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus, magnesium supplementation may be a potential therapy to treat type 2 diabetes mellitus. And although magnesium deficiency has been widely studied in type 2 diabetes mellitus. So what happens when they supplement? This is where we always go. We show that deficiency affects it, and then we show, does supplementation help it? The effects of oral magnesium supplementation on glycemic response among type 2 diabetes patients. The results of this study reveal that oral magnesium supplementation reduces insulin resistance and improves the glycemic control indicators among type 2 diabetes patients. So we show the deficiency causes problems, then we show that supplementation helps. That's about the best you're going to get, folks. Association of magnesium consumption with type 2 diabetes and glucose metabolism, a systematic review and pooled study with trial sequential analysis. Compared to the lowest magnesium intake, the highest level was associated with a 22% lower risk for type 2 diabetes. The risk was reduced by 6% for each 100 milligram increment in daily magnesium intake. Additional analysis of 26 RCTs, as in randomized controlled trials, was performed, revealing that magnesium supplementation significantly reduced the fasting plasma glucose level. 2-hour oral glucose tolerance test, fasting insulin level, HOMA-IR, the HOMA-IR score, the insulin resistance score, triglyceride level, systolic blood pressure, and diastolic blood pressure. Wow, that sounds great, right? The trial sequential analysis, is that what it was? Trial sequential analysis, yeah. So TSA showed an inverse association with most benefits of magnesium supplementation on glucose metabolism being stable. In conclusion, magnesium intake has an inverse dose response association with type 2 diabetes insulin and incidence. More magnesium, less diabetes. And supplementation appears to be glucose parameters in type 2 diabetes / high risk individuals. Okay, there's magnesium. Oh, and remember that vitamin A depleted magnesium. And then I showed triglyceride levels went down. So vitamin A depletes magnesium. And magnesium helped reduce triglycerides, and vitamin A raises triglycerides. Oh, wait, we don't need this one. We want this one. Okay. So let's keep going. So now we're on to zinc. Now remember, zinc is a vitamin A antagonist in a way. You need zinc to make retinol-binding protein. And zinc is definitely a copper antagonist. So if we found that vitamin A was bad for diabetes and copper was bad for diabetes and zinc is an antagonist effectively of both of them, we would expect zinc deficiency to make diabetes worse, and we would expect zinc supplementation to help diabetes based on these assumptions. What do we have here? Zinc intake and status and risk of type 2 diabetes mellitus, a systematic review and meta-analysis. A direct relationship was found between serum/plasma zinc levels and type 2 diabetes mellitus. A moderately high, I don't know what that means, moderately high dietary zinc intake in relation to the dietary reference intake could reduce by 13% the risk of type 2 diabetes mellitus and up to 41% in rural areas. Conversely, elevated serum/plasma zinc concentration was associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes mellitus by 64%, suggesting disturbances in zinc homeostasis. Didn't I just say earlier that there is such a thing as zinc toxicity? So maybe if somebody took too much, that could cause a problem. I have also seen high zinc on hair testing. However, that resolved over time with proper addressing of the liver. Disturbances in zinc homeostasis in the liver. So you fix the liver, and these people did often take zinc, and their zinc on their hair test came down. Were they losing zinc? I don't know, maybe. I don't always know what's happening. I just fix it. Because we fix the liver, and everything else snaps into line. So just imagine, like they were talking about what were they talking about? Magnesium. They were reducing it by 22% or 32%. And then if you fix the zinc, you're at 13% or 41%. Like, we address all these things. If people think that we're just like one-trick pony vitamin A toxicity, boy, they haven't watched these live streams. Zinc and diabetes mellitus, understanding molecular mechanisms and clinical implications. Our results show that zinc plays an important role in beta cell function. That's the pancreas cells that we're concerned with. Insulin action, glucose homeostasis, and pathogenesis, creation of diabetes and its complications. Numerous in vitro cell studies, basically, petri dish type stuff, and in vivo, whole animal, whole human studies have shown that zinc has beneficial effects in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, because both of these are toxicity and deficiency conditions. Numerous cell and whole animal. Effects of zinc supplementation on diabetes mellitus. So now we're going to give zinc. A systematic review and meta-analysis. Studies on humans have shown the beneficial effects of zinc supplementation in patients with diabetes. The pooled mean difference in fasting blood glucose, so blood glucose level, right, between zinc supplemented and placebo groups was 18 points. 2 hours after eating, blood sugar also shows a similar distinct reduction in the zinc treated group by 35 points. The pooled mean difference for total cholesterol between zinc supplemented and placebo groups was 32 points. LDL cholesterol also showed a similar distinct reduction in the zinc treated group. Studies have also shown a significant reduction in systolic and diastolic blood pressures after zinc supplementation. This first comprehensive systematic review and meta-analysis on the effects of zinc supplementation in patients with diabetes demonstrates that zinc supplementation has beneficial effects on glycemic control and promotes healthy lipid, as in like triglycerides and cholesterol parameters. Yeah, you might want to get your zinc. Let me see. There's zinc. Now we get to go into niacin, Kelsey's favorite topic. So at first, I want to thank Kelsey for sending me some of the links that I'm going to use here. I did go and get a couple more myself. And this was one that she sent me. So for those of you out there who think you read the studies on niacin or niacinamide or, these other niacin forms, and you get them confused, or you don't know. You're like, well, some of them say it's good and some of them say it's bad, and I don't know what to do. And short term, it might raise blood sugar a bit. Long term, it does help. This is very important. This paper is very, very, very important, because what we're going to be looking at when we look at niacin, nicotinic acid, crystalline powder nicotinic acid, flush niacin. When we look at this, a lot of these papers are using what's called niaspan, or the extended release niacin, the pharmaceutical pill trash. It's still got niacin in it. The niacin is still helpful. But what happens when they add if you guys are taking sustained release supplements, trash, garbage. I don't care if it's magnesium malate, as in a certain magnesium malate that is a sustained release. I saw problems show up in people who took sustained release magnesium malate pills, which are popular among some groups. The name is related to a puzzle, a type of puzzle that you might do on a kitchen table. A comparison of the efficacy and toxic effects of sustained release versus immediate release niacin in hypercholesterolemic patients, so high cholesterol patients. Immediate release is what we use. Sustained release is the pharmaceutical crap. It's still niacin, but it's the pharmaceutical crap. They're just doing this so you don't flush. Okay, 78% of the 23 patients assigned to the sustained release dosage form withdrew before completing the 3,000 milligram daily dose. 3 grams. That's a lot. The most common reasons for withdrawal were gastrointestinal tract symptoms, fatigue, and increases in levels of liver aminotransferases, liver enzymes, often with symptoms of hepatic dysfunction. None of the patients taking immediate release niacin, like a capsule of niacin or niacin powder in water, developed hepatotoxic effects, liver toxic effects, while 12 of the 23 patients taking sustained release niacin did. Let's look at their conclusion. Conclusion: the sustained release form of niacin is liver toxic and should be restricted from use. So when we're about to go through niacin studies, if they are sustained release niacin, which is what a lot of the studies are done with, they just said it shouldn't even be used because the sustained release part of it is liver toxic. So whenever you hear anybody out there talking about, oh, niacin, the studies on it is bad for your liver. No, it's the pharma cartel putting toxic crap in it. And some people are taking more than they should. This is a lot of niacin for a lot of people. Some people are just some people can't get over like 100 milligrams, or they're at 25 milligrams, or they can't even take it, because what niacin does is it increases your bile production. And if you increase your bile production too fast, like you need niacin to run your detox system. Niacin also increases your bile dumping, which is part of how you get rid of these toxins. But if you're sick, you're already leaking toxic bile into your bloodstream. So if you've still got the leaks and you increase your bile dumping too much, you leak more bile into your system and you don't feel good. So what do? The complicated thing? You don't feel good when you take flush niacin? Doc, it hurts when I do this. Don't do that. Do less, or don't do it. Kelsey, I think, said in the chat today, like, the most important thing you can do at the start, especially if you're really toxic, whether you admit it or not, if you react strongly to a lot of things, toxins, supplements, medications, everything, if you react really strongly to a bunch of things, you are really toxic. Your body is making you react to that stuff because it can't process it, and it's telling you to get the heck away from it. You're not ready for this yet. So don't do it yet. I don't understand how anybody it makes them, thinks that they make themselves worse on my program when I'm constantly saying, you don't feel good doing it, don't do it. Like, if If somebody cannot handle that level of logic, I don't want them in the program. Okay, so if you're like trying to send somebody to me and they're like hard-headed and they're just like, well, the doctor said I should try this, so I'm going to take it, and I don't feel good on it, but I'm going to keep taking it because the doctor said it. Don't send them to me. I don't want them. I don't want people who are too dumb to listen to their own body. One of the things that people tell me that they like the best that I do is I'm actually teaching people to listen to your body. Now this doesn't mean I feel good when I do this, because then the joke that I have about that is crackheads love crack. That doesn't mean it's good for them. People love stimulants. Like stimulant, I love stimulants. Like they love all sorts of stimulants. Copper's a stimulant. Vitamin A in liver is a stimulant. That's why some people say, oh, I eat liver, I get so much energy. Stimulants do not mean it's good for you. It means it's a stimulant. Many toxins are stimulants. I mean, what are we giving kids for ADD? We're giving them amphetamines. Okay, stimulants. So just because something makes you feel good does not mean it's good for you. And if something makes you feel bad, you should not do that. Okay? So again, sustained release niacin is liver toxic. So if you see studies on niacin and it's sustained release, don't blame the niacin, blame the sustained release. Okay, so now let's go into niacin and diabetes. Oh, wow, I didn't know this. Kelsey just brought up. So Dr. Stevens, the dextrose and glucose guy, is pushing Smarties candy. Smarties candy are full of aluminum-based dyes. Any dye that says lake is aluminum-based. Why would anybody take glucose or dextrose? What's the main thing it does? It raises your blood glucose. What is diabetes again? And I showed in my, Joe, you may want to bring up the glucose and dextrose fad live stream. What does an excess of glucose and dextrose do? It slows down your ALDH. Glucose and dextrose can turn into 4 or 5 different aldehydes in your system. Did we go over aldehydes and diabetes? I think we did. Spooning sugar into your drinks or your food or your water is not going to save you. Nicotinic acid is also safe for use in patients with diabetes with no evidence of clinically relevant deterioration in glycemic control at recommended doses less than or equal to 2 grams a day. A lot of people are worried about niacin causing blood sugar problems. Let me explain to you something about the approach we do here. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Modern medicine, conventional medicine, even most alternative practitioners who do blood tests, they kind of listen to your symptoms, but they look at your labs and they say, I want these labs to look better. And so they give you pharmaceuticals or herbs or orthomolecular levels, like mega doses of nutrients, to try to force your labs to look better. So they want your labs to look better, but then over time, because they're usually poisoning you, you eventually get worse. So your labs look better at the start, but eventually you look worse. Okay, so what's the opposite? What do we do here? We are working on the root cause, the true causes of these problems. So what's going to happen sometimes is, as you start doing things that we talk about in our framework, if you are tracking your labs might look a little worse at the start. The woman who we helped fix her primary biliary cirrhosis, liver cirrhosis, the woman we helped fix that, her liver enzymes got worse at the start. She had to trust me that it was going to get better. She got better. Now she doesn't have cirrhosis. Grant doesn't have chronic kidney disease. His kidney labs may have gotten worse at the start. He was probably feeling better, but his labs may have gotten worse. Labs are, don't obsess on labs, especially at the start. What you want to focus on is, at least we don't want to feel worse, and hopefully we're starting to see improvements in symptoms. So if your symptoms are improving, but your labs get a little worse, go by what you're observing in your body. Your body is running better. Okay. So even if I saw like load, well, first of all, we can adjust the niacin intake so that somebody is not having these issues. It doesn't have to be 2 grams, 3 grams, 4 grams a day. We have people doing great on 25 milligrams or 100 milligrams. Any amount of niacin you can take is good. If you do the Love Your Liver program, you're reducing the load on your detox system so you don't need as much NAD because there's less toxins around. So the first thing we do is reduce the toxin intake. That's always the first thing. So, moving on. Effectiveness of niacin supplementation for patients with type 2 diabetes. So 8 randomized controlled trials, 2,000 patients. The patient's niacin supplementation was associated with lower levels of total cholesterol, triglycerides, and low density lipoprotein. Vitamin A is in there, raised by vitamin A. We saw vitamin A connected to diabetes. Moreover, the level of HDL was significantly increased when niacin supplementation was provided. But again, each person has to individualize their dosing. That's why we have the whole series of articles from Kelsey in the Love Your Liver program going over how to adjust your dosing for you. We don't do, people ask me, how much niacin should I take? And I go, that's not a question I answer. We don't do protocols. Protocols are low IQ. Protocols are telling you to turn off your brain and ignore what you're feeling and just take this many milligrams of something. Protocols are low IQ. Programs where we are teaching you how to listen to your body and adjust things within a framework, high IQ. CoQ10 and niacin mitigate streptozotocin-induced diabetic encephalopathy. This is like, this is brain problems. Diabetic-induced brain problems in a rat model. Remember, one injection can cause diabetes of this ivermectin relative. Diabetic encephalopathy is an important complication of diabetes characterized by, did I put this one in there too? Yeah. Characterized by cognitive impairment, neurochemical and structural abnormalities. So how does it get from the pancreas to the brain? Oh, it's connected via the liver. And what the liver puts into the blood that's attacking the brain. There's also hepatic encephalopathy, which is liver-based brain problems. This study aimed to investigate the effect of CoQ10 and niacin, as well as their combination in the treatment of encephalopathy associated with streptozotocin-induced diabetes in rats. So yes, toxins can induce diabetes. The present data illustrated that combining CoQ10 and niacin exhibiting the most potent effect in improving the measured parameters and ameliorating some of the diabetes complications. Efficacy, safety, and tolerability of once daily niacin for the treatment of dyslipidemia associated with type 2 diabetes. Results of the assessment of diabetes control and evaluation of the efficacy of Niaspan. This is the sustained release stuff. Trial. So, diabetic dyslipidemia is characterized by high triglyceride levels, vitamin A toxicity, niacin deficiency, low high density lipoprotein cholesterol levels, small dense low density lipoprotein particles, and high free fatty acid levels. Free fatty acids are inflammatory. What does your body do to get free fatty acids out of the blood and vitamin A out of the blood and other fat soluble toxins? It binds the toxins and the vitamin A to free fatty acids and shoves them into your liver to get them out of the bloodstream where they'll stop causing you problems. Niacin reduces concentrations of triglyceride-rich and small LDL particles while increasing HDL cholesterol levels. It also lowers levels of free fatty acids and lipoprotein A. This is a marker of inflammation. It lowers an inflammatory compound and an inflammatory marker. However, the use of niacin in patients with diabetes has been discouraged because high doses can worsen glycemic control. What do you think is causing this? Niaspan, sustained release, toxic binders, and sustained release things. We evaluated the efficacy and safety of once daily extended release niacin in patients with diabetic dyslipidemia. So they're going to see all the good changes. Okay. Less hemoglobin A1C. We'll just come down here. 4 patients discontinued participation because of inadequate glucose control. Maybe they were taking too much. Like they're taking 1,500 milligrams. That might be too much for them. Rates of adverse events, rates other than flushing, were similar for the niacin and placebo groups. So flushing, they didn't count as an adverse effect. 4 patients discontinued participation owing to flushing, including 1 receiving a placebo. No hepatotoxic effects or myopathy were observed. So, low doses of extended release niacin, 1,000 or 1,500 milligrams a day, are a treatment option for dyslipidemia in patients with type 2 diabetes. So they're not scared of it. They just give the crappy stuff. Now, are the effects of nicotinic acid on insulin resistance precipitated by abnormal phosphorus metabolism? I don't want to spend too much time on this. I'm going to tell you folks, regardless of what you've read about, other people's ramblings on calcium and phosphorus and all that stuff. Phosphorus in the body, phosphates, phosphorus, alkaline phosphatase, hair phosphorus, is controlled, modulated by zinc. Phosphorus in the body is controlled by zinc. Okay, then. We know that diabetics don't have enough zinc, which if I was looking on a hair test and I see somebody with low phosphorus on a hair test, we can bring up their phosphorus on a hair test by giving them the right amount of zinc over time. We don't give them phosphorus. We don't have them eat more high phosphorus foods. We give them zinc and their hair phosphorus levels come up over time. So here they're saying, are the effects precipitated or led ahead by abnormal phosphorus metabolism? Could some of the problems that people see with niacin be related to an underlying zinc deficiency? Oh, that would be a weird connection, wouldn't it? So let me see if there's anything. I'm just connecting the phosphorus for you guys. That's what we're doing. Did I put this one up there? No. When you think phosphorus in the body, think zinc deficiency. When you think people talking about low phosphorus and stuff like that. Oh, and this was just a fun one that I found. Blood levels of nicotinic acid, of flush niacin, negatively correlate with hearing ability in healthy older men. Let's just go down here. Yeah, so we identified negative correlations between blood concentrations of nicotinic acid and hearing ability at 1,000 and 2,000 hertz. NAD metabolic pathway might be associated with ARHL onset or progression. So, yep. We've fixed tinnitus in people a lot. Yeah. So, let's go to potassium. Potassium and risk of type 2 diabetes. We talk a lot about potassium. A lot. One of the ways that you can know if you're potassium deficient is if you get really tired very soon after you eat. Potassium deficiency is almost guaranteed. If you have vitamin A toxicity, vitamin A blocks potassium channels. Copper toxicity depletes potassium. Vitamin D supplements deplete potassium. Vitamin D supplements and vitamin A also raise calcium in the blood, and high calcium, I didn't pull up studies with this, I forgot to, but high calcium is related to diabetes in general. More calcium than you need. So potassium, both serum levels and to a lesser extent, dietary intake levels has been associated with incident diabetes. So we connected vitamin A to it. We connected copper to it. Lower levels of potassium have been found to be associated with a higher risk of diabetes in some studies. Oh, we're not, did I forget to share that one? There we go. Got it. Did I have anything else on this one? Nope. Let's just keep going. Dietary potassium intake and risk of diabetes, a systematic review and meta-analysis of prospective studies. Dose-response analysis detected a nonlinear relationship between dietary potassium intake and diabetes risk, with a significant inverse association, as in more potassium, less diabetes, starting from 2,900 milligrams a day by questionnaire and between 2,000 and 5,000 milligrams a day by urinary excretion. That's to be peeing out five grams a day of potassium. Those folks have to be losing potassium like crazy. Gosh, what would cause that? I don't know. Vitamin A and copper toxicity, vitamin D supplements. But so when they got above 2,900 milligrams a day of potassium, that's when they saw an inverse association. So a lower risk of diabetes. If you're not actively trying to get potassium in your diet, you're probably nowhere near this. Biggest signs of potassium deficiency: fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, depression, trouble falling asleep initially at night. You don't have to have all of those. Oh, and then the getting very tired soon after you eat. You don't have to have all of those. One of them is enough. But if you have multiple of those, you probably got a potassium deficiency. Potassium deficiency we fix in the short term by getting more potassium. Chronic potassium deficiency is being caused by the toxicity in you, which we get rid of over the long term. The beneficial threshold of like 2,900 milligrams found supports the campaigns in favor of an increase in dietary potassium intake to reduce the risk of morbidity. This is diseases and mortality, death. The risk of diseases and the risks of death. Potassium is terribly underrated and undervalued. It is the biggest thing that you do not go out there and do stupid amounts of potassium. Go up slowly. As always, try bananas. If you know, bananas, 500 milligrams of potassium. So I want you to think about that. They just said 2,900 milligrams of potassium in a day was where the threshold was, where they started to see a lower risk of diabetes. A banana is 500. 8 ounces of coconut water is somewhere between 400 and 600. So let's just say 500. Do you realize, and those are high potassium foods. Do you realize how hard you have to work on potassium to get your potassium up? Potassium measurements and risk of type 2 diabetes, a dose-response meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies. Low serum potassium increases the risk of type 2 diabetes mellitus in a linear dose-response manner. So, low potassium is bad. Now, I wanted to go over, I was seeing stuff on Twitter, and of course, everybody's out there. There are so many psyops going on. I just saw somebody on Twitter say, I just heard that 8 grams of salt a day is recommended. 8 grams of salt. It's a significant amount. That's like 2 teaspoons of just salt. I want to tell you folks something. When certain people are sick, they may need more salt than normal. However, as we get people better, we have seen them over time need less salt than they used to. Some of you may be able to back this up in the chat. Okay? Forcing salt in your system is not fixing anything. Like, if you ate no salt, so this sodium is kind of a mixed bag, okay? I've had people who come to me and they tell me they never salt their food. And I'll tell you that those people, as I worked with them, they never improved. And they kept insisting on drinking their like green smoothies and all this other crap. So they never improved. I said, I think you're going to have to eat. This was even a chiropractor in town. I told her, I said, I think you're going to have to start salting your food a bit. And I think you're going to start kind of liking it. She just grew up not salting her food. Her mom never salted her food. Again, nature and nurture, right? Her mom taught her this. Well, I think people, especially if they want to be athletic, and this woman did go to the gym. If they want to be athletic and sweat a lot and do that stuff, if you don't get some extra salt, you're probably going to run out. Why do animals like salt licks? They do need some sodium. Some. More is not better. So when I have people who, if you're one of those people who does not salt your food, you're going to get problems. Okay? But that doesn't mean more is better. And we have a lot of people, even in the program, who are salting their food way too much because they just go, I kind of like this. And then salt, you kind of, I mean, what do people want in their comfort foods? They want fat and sugar and salt. That's basically comfort foods. And starch. Starches, sugars, salt, and fat. Well, we know that people can get addicted to and overdo fat and starch and sugar. So why does it not make sense that they would possibly tend towards overdoing salt as well? I mean, salt is good, right? I mean, people like sugar. I'm not a sugar person myself, but people like sugar and they start eating more of it. People like salt, they start eating more of it. People like, starch and they start eating more of it. How many people were in love with fat before, where they're just like, every food has to be so fatty? So, can you do too much salt? Of course you can. If you're one of those people where everybody around you is like watching you at the dinner table and they're like, oh my gosh, you put a lot of salt on that, you're probably over salting. You may be listening to this now going, I over salt. I know I do. Like I don't. I've gone down in sodium use. I just kind of went, do I need? So just think about this. There's the amount of salt you would love to put in it. And then there's the amount of salt. Are you just okay with that? Right? Because we do tend to overdo things. We are kind of designed to overdo things because we're programmed to avoid starvation and avoid a lack of things. So when we have them around, we tend to do too much of them. Well, when you live in the Western world, you have too much of everything around. It's too easy to get. So let's just look at this. Sodium status is associated with type 2 diabetes mellitus, a systematic review and meta-analysis of observational studies. Individuals with type 2 diabetes mellitus had a higher sodium intake compared to non-diabetic controls. And 24-hour urinary excretion of sodium was associated with likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes mellitus. Furthermore, salivary sodium, hair sodium, and platelet sodium were higher in patients with type 2 diabetes compared to controls. The findings of this current meta-analysis suggest that sodium levels are higher in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus compared to non-diabetic controls. However, given that these studies are observational, it is not possible to infer causality. Somebody's going to twist this and try to say, I don't like salt. No, I'm saying you can get too little salt, and a lot of people are doing too much. Now, if you have a condition or you've figured out for yourself that when you eat more sodium, you feel better, okay, go with that. That's kind of like what we would call a crutch or a Band-Aid. Because as we get you better, if you do the work, you're not going to need that much salt. Kelsey could probably attest to this. Kelsey used to do a lot of salt for her pots, and she doesn't have to do as much anymore. Like, this is actually fixing the deeper problems. This is what we do. So let's do another paper. Dietary sodium intake in type 2 diabetes. And remember, sodium and potassium are antagonistic. So we just saw that potassium was low in diabetes. And as we're going to see in this paper and the one we just saw before, there's too much sodium. So how do we fix that? Well, you get more sodium. You get more potassium and you get less sodium. It's not that hard. One of the things we do to do that is 50-50 salt, which is sodium chloride and potassium chloride, half and half, with a little bit of cream of tartar added. It helps. It's a potassium bitartrate. It helps balance out the flavor. You make that, And then every time you salt your food, you're getting less sodium and more potassium. EMP said, loving the Stone Cold Steve Austin meme, Doc. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll have to post those on YouTube here so everybody can see them. So here we go. The aim of this study was to quantify dietary sodium intake in a cohort of self-referred patients with type 2 diabetes and to identify socio-demographic characteristics associated with it. Sodium intake in this cohort was far greater than current recommendations. Far greater. Not just greater, far greater. So can you overdo zinc? Sure. Can you overdo sodium? Sure. Might you need more zinc? Sure. Might you need more sodium at times? Sure. All of these things can exist. This is why we're trying to find the solution within the framework for each person. I mean, I'll tell you, sometimes I talk to couples as an example, and either the husband or the wife or whatever will say when I'm talking to them about, they were having certain issues, and I might say, is it possible you salt your food too much? And the other spouse will be like, oh yeah. We're pretty sure we have an issue then, right? Potassium deficiency is everywhere. Sodium excess if you're eating processed foods, or if you're just salting your food like crazy, then you might be taking in too much salt. Okay. And finally, molybdenum. Oh, this is going to be a fun one because most people don't know about molybdenum. Molybdenum is a trace mineral. It is necessary for multiple detox pathways. And hardly anybody knows about it. And the best food source to get it is from beans, which a lot of people have turned into bad things in their head. But I can also tell you that the beans today do not have the amount of molybdenum that they did in them 3, 4, 5 years ago at all. There's way less molybdenum in all foods. Inverse association of plasma molybdenum with metabolic syndrome in a Chinese adult population, a case control study. So lower plasma molybdenum, more metabolic syndrome. In our study, higher plasma molybdenum was significantly associated with a lower risk of metabolic syndrome, as well as its components in a dose-response manner. Can you take too much molybdenum? Sure. If you're not testing molybdenum, the most I would consider taking is 150 micrograms a day. If you are not testing, you better watch out if you go and you buy these high-dose molybdenum supplements like from Seeking Health or Thorne, where it's 500 micrograms a pill, or for the Seeking Health one, or the Thorne, 1,000 micrograms per pill. You can mess yourself up. I don't know why they made those stupid high doses. But if you just go out and you don't know how much you're taking, you just assume, well, Dr. Smith said take molybdenum, I'm just going to go buy a pill. You could mess yourself up. If you did something, oh my goodness. Let's say you're like, well, I don't want to take any of the fillers in the capsules, so I'm going to go buy molybdenum powder. Do you understand like the tiny, tiny amount of dust that 150 micrograms is? So if you start trying to, like when people take boron, oh my gosh, I had a guy, he's like, I'm just taking what was he taking? 1 chunk of borax a day. His boron on a hair test was off the charts. Boron causes infertility, chronic dosing. His boron was off the charts. He was just taking 1 little chunk of it. You can mess yourself up trying to do powders. You better know what you're doing if you're trying to measure out powders, or you might mess yourself up, and that's not my fault. Okay? I mean, as an example, children have died from fortified milk when they accidentally put too much vitamin D in fortified milk. Children have died. So if you're at home measuring out powders, you better know what you're doing, or you may mess yourself up real bad. Especially if you start messing with these microgram doses. Microgram scales are expensive. Milligram scales are not too bad, but microgram scales are expensive. So, next one. Oh, and remember, molybdenum is a copper antagonist. So molybdenum, when we talk about an antagonist, it either helps you absorb less from, the food, or it helps you excrete more. Could be either. Could be both. So zinc is a copper antagonist. Molybdenum is a copper antagonist. Improvement of glucose and lipid metabolism in diabetic rats treated with molybdate. This means it's molybdenum bound to something. Like citrate is citric acid bound to something. Molybdate is molybdenum bound to something. Okay, we have investigated the effects of oral administration of sodium molybdate for 8 weeks on carbohydrate and lipid metabolism in streptozotocin diabetic rats. I'm going to say it again, ivermectin relative. Molybdenum decreased high blood glucose, hyperglycemia, and glucose in the urine by 75%, and corrected the elevation of plasma non-esterified fatty acids. I'm guessing that means free fatty acids. Non-esterified, yeah. Tolerance to glucose loads was improved and glycogen stores were replenished. These effects were not due to a rise of insulinemia, insulin in the blood. In the liver, molybdenum restored the blunted mRNA and activity of glucokinase and pyruvate kinase and decreased to normal phosphoenol pyruvate carboxykinase values. Finally, molybdenum totally reversed the low expression and activity of acetyl-CoA carboxylase and fatty acid synthase in the liver, but not in white adipose tissue. In conclusion, molybdenum exerts a marked blood glucose lowering effect in diabetic rats by an insulin-like action. This effect results in part from a restoration of hepatic glucose metabolism and is associated with a tissue-specific correction of lipogenic fat-making enzyme gene expression, both processes being essentially mediated by reversal of impaired, slowed down, pre-translational regulatory mechanisms. Wow, molybdenum sounds pretty good. I think this is the last thing I have to go over. Yeah. Impact on glucose homeostasis. Is food biofortified with molybdenum a workable solution? A two-arm study. So biofortified is, it's kind of a tricky term. So the idea of breeding crops to increase their nutritional value. This can be done either through conventional selective breeding, like hybridizing plants, like you're just combining plants, or through genetic engineering. You can do it GMO, or you can just do normal hybrid. So don't assume that biofortified automatically means GMO. Remember, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and cabbage, were all conventional selective breeding. They all come from the mustard plant. None of the big cruciferous vegetables that we eat today existed naturally. They were all created by humans hybridizing them. Not GMO, just hybridizing plants, just like they did with dogs to create all the different dog breeds. Okay? So they don't say here what kind of biofortification they're doing, I don't think. So let's go here. Did I always put this one? I think so. Okay. Minerals are of paramount importance in order to preserve and obtain good health, and among them, molybdenum is an essential component. And most of you here probably never heard about it as a nutritional mineral until you came across my stuff, right? It happens all the time. So they, what did they do? A cohort of 24 people was supplemented with biofortified lettuce for 12 days. The results showed that consumption of lettuce biofortified with molybdenum for 12 days did not affect beta cell function, but significantly reduced fasting glucose, insulin resistance, and increased insulin sensitivity in healthy people. Consumption of biofortified lettuce did not show any modification in urine concentration of molybdenum among the groups. These data suggest that consumption of lettuce biofortified with molybdenum improves glucose homeostasis, and PYY and GIP are involved in the action mechanism. You want to know why they didn't see it in their urine? Probably because their body was holding on to it and using it. It wasn't peeing it out because it loved it. Oh, and then I have another paper on molybdenum helping with iron overload and iron deficiency. If you don't know about molybdenum, you want to know. So that is that. That is the diet. So what would, I mean, all the things we went over, right? We went over toxic bile theory. We went over the biome. We went over vitamin A toxicity, copper toxicity. We covered a bit of manganese toxicity. We covered aldehyde toxicity. We covered all the, the zinc and the magnesium and the potassium and the molybdenum and even sodium excess. There's a lot of things that are connected to your health issues. Anyone who throws it all on one thing, it may work for some people. Once in a while, you'll read somebody, they'll be like, I did this and it fixed all my problems. Okay, they hit a home run on that one, or they suppressed their disease problem. They may have just suppressed it and it's going to come up later. Never forget about that. Who cares about week-long testimonials or a month-long testimonial? We care about years-long testimonials. That's what we want. So, think I covered it. So, Joe, I don't know. Did we have any super chats today? We may not have done any super chats because I was just running on the diabetes thing. Let me get back in here. Oh, I'm kind of shrinking in my chair. Ugh. When I do 4-hour live stream, sometimes I start sinking in my chair a little bit. Okay. Joe, were there any were there any let's see. You can take it off the share now. If anybody has any super chats, you're welcome to put them up. Otherwise, I'm going to start at the top. I'll go through a couple of questions just to get through a couple of them. Let's see. Oh, wait, can I not even get all the way to the chats? Because 466 chats. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I can't even get to the top of the the chat anymore. So, well, we're at 4 hours anyway. I'm just going to wrap it up, man. I got to go do my inner circle. One of the funny things I want to tell you guys about is I talked about a certain fiber that I'm testing out. Funny thing, I did some research on it. It actually chelates copper and helps get rid of copper, and it fits into the toxic bile theory framework. Absolutely. I've been noticing impressive effects on what I consider my hormonal axes. And I talked about those in the inner circle last week. The inner circle is inside the Love Your Liver network. It's a private live stream that I'm going to do as soon as I'm done here. But I told everybody there what it was last week. And the impressive results are continuing as I take my 1 scoop a day. I've been looking into, how I can bring this to people. Don't ask Julie about it yet because I'm not even telling you the name of it. So don't ask her. But yeah, this is where in the vitamin A detox world and the loving your liver world, this is where the new information comes from. So whenever you hear other people talking about stuff in the vitamin A detox world that's new, it's typically coming from here. Other people will still be doing old things that they haven't figured out yet actually are worse for the vitamin A detox process. These would be things like vitamin E and vitamin C, and people actually thinking that drinking alcohol is going to help them detox vitamin A. You should know, we have been through all of these things. If you can imagine how much research I just went through today, we've already been through all that research. We tested all that crap. It didn't work. And now that we understand the mechanisms of like ALDH and bile and the duration paradox, which is where things look good in the short term and destroy the very same thing in the long term, we have moved past all of these mistaken theories. Do not look at any short-term studies and try to expect that to be long-term. This would be like looking at pharmaceuticals and going, pharmaceuticals look good in short-term studies, and then you go, well, long-term, they're a disaster. Well, this happens with food-based toxins too. It happens with certain minerals too, like manganese. And yeah. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. Hope you all enjoyed yourself. I did not see any super chats. No, Joe says there's no super chats. So we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to go to the inner circle now and maybe talk more about this new testing ground thing that I'm doing. It's pretty awesome. Actually, I have somebody in the Love Your Liver program I just shipped some to because I wanted them to try it. So I'm pretty excited about this stuff. So I will talk to you guys next week. Again, if you need to find me, if you want to find more information from me, go down in the info box. Don't forget to like and subscribe and post comments and all that stuff. But the most important thing that helps the algorithm is to watch more time on the channel. So have a great week. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you can help yourself and your friends with the information. And I will see you next time. Bye now.